In a grand London mansion, a tycoon lies dead, a blood-stained letter opener in his chest, mailed to himself with a chilling note predicting his murder. Who sent it? Was it the ambitious fiancé, the resentful son, or the scorned wife? As Miss Jane Marple unravels a web of love, betrayal, and a decoy parcel, a shocking truth emerges: the killer was closer than anyone dared imagine, hiding behind a mask of loyalty. But what if the parcel wasn't just a trap, was a confession? Chapter 1. The peculiar parcel. In the drowsy village of St. Mary Mead, where the lanes curled like ribbons around ancient cottages and the air carried the faint perfume of honeysuckle, Miss Jane Marple sat in her drawing room, her knitting needles moving with the steady rhythm of a metronome. The afternoon sunlight filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the polished oak floor. Her parlour was a haven of order, a mahogany tea table, a vase of freshly cut roses, and a bookshelf laden with well-thumbed novels and gardening manuals. The world beyond her windows seemed content to slumber, but Miss Marple's mind, sharp as the needles in her hands, was never truly at rest. She was midway through a row of pearl stitches when the front door burst open, admitting her nephew, Raymond. West, with the urgency of a man pursued by scandal. His cheeks were flushed, his ties slightly askew, and his eyes gleamed with the fervor of a storyteller who had stumbled upon a tale too extraordinary to keep. "Aunt Jane," he exclaimed, tossing his hat onto the nearest chair. "You simply must hear this. It's the most bizarre affair in London. A man has mailed his own murder." Miss Marple's needles paused, hovering like a conductor's baton before the next note. She adjusted her spectacles, her pale blue eyes narrowing with interest. "Mailed his own murder," she repeated, her voice soft but laced with curiosity. "That is a phrase designed to intrigue, Raymond. Pray, do sit down and explain yourself before you upset the tea tray." Raymond, never one for stillness, paced before the fireplace, his hands gesturing animatedly. "It's Sir Reginald Hargrove, the industrialist, you know, the one with the steel empire and that monstrous house in Kensington. 2 days ago, he received a parcel at his London office. Inside was a letter opener, sharp as a razor and stained with blood, along with a note, declaring it the weapon that would kill him. The postmark was from the previous day, sent from his own country house in Surrey. And then this morning he was found dead in his study, stabbed through the heart with that very same opener." Miss Marple set her knitting in her lap, her fingers resting lightly on the wall. "How very modern," she murmured. "A murder announced by post. It has a certain theatrical flair, don't you think? Tell me, was the parcel truly sent by Sir Reginald himself?" "That's the devil of it," Raymond said, flopping into an armchair at last. "The police say the handwriting on the address matches his, and the postmaster in Surrey swears he saw Hargrove drop it in the box. But why would a man mail himself a threat? And how did the killer know to use that exact weapon?" Miss Marple tilted her head, her expression serene but her mind already sifting through possibilities. "People are often careless with their intentions, Raymond. A man might send such a parcel as a jest, or a warning, or even a trap. But for whom? What did the police make of it?" "They're stumped," Raymond admitted, running a hand through his hair. "Inspector Craddock, you remember him? The fellow who handled that business with the vicar's niece. He's leading the case. Says it's a locked room mystery. Hargrove was found in his study, doors bolted from the inside, no sign of a struggle. The only clue is that blasted parcel." Miss Marple's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Locked rooms are rarely as impenetrable as they seem. Doors and windows are mechanical things, but human motives, those are far more malleable. What sort of man was Sir Reginald? Raymond leaned forward, eager to paint the picture. Rich as Croesus, for one. Owned half the steel mills in the north, with a reputation for ruthlessness in business. Not much liked, if I'm honest. Married to a glamorous younger wife, Lady Evelyn Hargrove, who spends more time at charity galas than at home. 2 grown children, Edgar, an artist type who's always squabbling with his father over money, and Amelia, the clever one, engaged to some banker chap named Victor Lang. Then there's the usual cast, a secretary, a business partner, a few disgruntled employees. Oh, and Hargrove was rumoured to be rewriting his will, which has everyone in a tizzy. A will, Miss Marple said softly, her fingers resuming their knitting. That is a document that often stirs the pot. And this parcel, was it opened? In front of witnesses. Only his secretary, a Miss Lydia Black. She says Hargrove laughed it off as a prank, but he locked it in his desk drawer all the same. Next morning, he was dead, and the opener was in his chest. Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily, a counterpoint to the ticking of the mantel clock. A prank that became prophecy, or perhaps it was always meant to be fulfilled. I should like to see this household for myself, Raymond. Families, you know, are like my garden, full of hidden roots that tangle beneath the surface. Raymond grinned, sensing an adventure. I knew you'd bite, Aunt Jane. I've already spoken to Craddock. He's willing to let you poke around. Unofficially, of course. Shall I book you a train to London tomorrow? Miss Marple considered, her gaze drifting to the roses on the table. Yes, I think so. A murder by mail is not something one encounters in St. Mary Mead every day, and I do find the post office such a reliable institution until it isn't. The next morning, Miss Marple boarded the 9:15 train to London, her small suitcase packed, with essentials and a skein of pale blue wool for the journey. The countryside blurred past, all greens and golds under a September sky. But her thoughts were elsewhere, piecing together the fragments Raymond had provided. A blood-stained letter opener, a note foretelling death, a postmark from a distant village. It was a puzzle that demanded both precision and imagination. She had seen many such puzzles in her time, in the quiet lanes of St. Mary Mead, where neighbourly smiles often masked darker truths. A village, she reflected, was not so different from a grand London mansion. Both were stages for human nature, with its jealousies, loyalties, and betrayals. Arriving at Paddington Station, she was met by Inspector Craddock, a sturdy man in his 40s with a no-nonsense air softened by a grudging respect for Miss Marple's unconventional methods. Miss Marple, he said, tipping his hat. I hope you're not expecting miracles. This case is a right mess. No fingerprints, no forced entry, and that parcel muddies everything. My dear Inspector, she replied, her voice mild as ever. I expect only what people reveal, intentionally or otherwise. Shall we visit the scene? The Hargrove mansion on Kensington Gardens was a monument to wealth, its Georgian facade, all columns and symmetry, yet its windows seemed to watch the world with a guarded air. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of beeswax and old money. The butler, a dear man named Parsons, led them to the study, a room of dark wood and leather-bound tomes. The desk dominated the space, its surface cluttered with papers, an ink and a silver cigarette case. A chalk outline marked where Sir Reginald had fallen, near a Persian rug now stained with a dark, ominous bloom. Here's where we found him, Craddock said, pointing to the floor. Stabbed once, clean through the heart. The letter opener was still in him, matches the one from the parcel. Doors were bolted from the inside, windows latched. No one could have got in or out. Miss Marple stepped carefully around the room, her eyes taking in every detail, the heavy velvet curtains, the fireplace with its cold ashes, the brass key in the door's lock. She paused by the desk, where the parcel lay open, its contents now in police custody. The envelope, however, remained. A thick cream paper with Hargrove's name in a bold, looping script. The postmark read, Dorking, Surrey, dated 2 days prior. Sent from his country house, she murmured, tracing the postmark with a gloved finger. And yet he received it here, in London. How curious that a man should mail himself such a grim promise. Craddock frowned. You think he didn't? Send it, I think, Miss Marple said, that people are often less careful with their possessions than they imagine. Stationery, for instance, lies about in drawers, accessible to anyone with a purpose. And purposes, Inspector, are what we must uncover. She moved to the window, testing the latch. It was firm, but the frame was old, the wood slightly warped. A window may be latched, she said, almost to herself, but latches are such simple things. A bit of wire, a steady hand. Craddock raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting someone tampered with it. Not suggesting, merely wondering. Tell me about the household. Who was here when Sir Reginald died? Craddock flipped open his notebook. Lady Hargrove was upstairs, preparing for a charity luncheon. Says she heard nothing. Edgar, the son, was in his studio. That's the attic, full of canvases and paint fumes. Amelia, the daughter, was out with her fiancé, Victor Langthough. They returned around midnight. The secretary, Lydia Black, was in the office downstairs, typing letters. Parsons and the maid, Elsie, were in the servants' quarters. No one saw or heard anything unusual, or so they claim. Miss Marple nodded, her gaze lingering on the desk. And the parcel, when did Sir Reginald open it? Yesterday afternoon, according to Miss Black. She was with him when it arrived. He read the note, turned pale, then laughed and said, it was some fool's idea of a joke, locked it in the drawer and sent her away. A joke, Miss Marple echoed. Yet he locked it away. Not the action of a man entirely unconcerned. She stepped back, her eyes sweeping the room once more. I should like to meet the family, Inspector, and perhaps this Miss Black, secretaries. You know, are like village postmistresses. They see everything, even if they don't always speak of it. The drawing room was a contrast to the study, all pale silks and delicate porcelain, yet the tension within was palpable. Lady Evelyn Hargrove reclined on a chaise longue, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, her eyes red-rimmed but artfully made up. She was a woman in her early 40s, beautiful in a calculated way, her silk dress whispering of Paris ateliers. This is dreadful, she said, her voice tremulous. Reginald was difficult, yes, but who could do such a thing? Difficult how? Miss Marple asked, settling into a chair with her knitting bag at her side. Lady Hargrove hesitated, glancing. At Craddock he was distant, consumed by his business. Lately, he suspected his partners of mismanagement. He spoke of enemies, but I thought it was just his temper. Edgar Hargrove entered next, a lanky young man with ink-stained fingers and a sullen expression. His dark hair fell over his eyes, and he carried the faint scent of turpentine. Father was a tyrant, he said bluntly, ignoring his mother's gasp. Cut my allowance because I wouldn't join his blasted company. Said art was a waste of time. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. "And yet you live here, Mr. Hargrove. That suggests some attachment." Edgar snorted. "Attachment to a roof over my head. He was about to kick me out, you know, rewriting his will to favor Amelia." Amelia Hargrove swept in, her tailored suit as sharp as her tongue. She was in her late 20s, with her father's strong jaw and a glint of ambition in her eyes. "That's nonsense, Edgar. Father was fair. He wanted me to take over the business, yes, but only because you refused to grow up. Fair." Edgar snapped. "He was cutting you in because you're marrying that banker, Victor. Father thought he could control the firm through him." Miss Marple's eyes flicked between them. "A will can be a powerful thing," she said mildly. "And a wedding, too. When is your marriage to Mr. Lang, Miss Hargrove?" Amelia flushed. "Next spring. Victor's a partner at Barclays. Father approved or arranged?" Miss Marple asked, her tone gentle but probing. Amelia stiffened. "What are you implying?" "Only that families are complex, my dear. Like my knitting, one drop stitch can unravel the whole pattern." The maid, Elsie, brought tea, her hands trembling slightly as she set down the tray. Miss Marple noted her unease, the way her eyes darted to Lady Hargrove before dropping to the floor. "Elsie," she said kindly, "did you see the parcel when it arrived?" "Yes, ma'am," Elsie whispered. "Sir took it to his study. He looked queer, like he'd seen a ghost." Craddock interjected. "We've questioned the staff. No one saw anything odd that night. The house was quiet." "Quiet," Miss Marple repeated, "is often the loudest sound of all." After the family dispersed, Miss Marple requested a word with Lydia Black, the secretary. She found her in the office, a small room off the main hall, surrounded by filing cabinets and typewriters. Lydia was a plain woman in her 30s, her brown hair pulled into a tight bun, her fingers stained with ink. She stood as Miss Marple entered, her expression guarded but polite. "Miss Black," Miss Marple began, settling into a chair. "You were with Sir Reginald when he opened the parcel. What was his mood?" Lydia clasped her hands. "He was himself at first, brisk, all business. But when he saw the opener and the note, he went still. Then he laughed, but it wasn't his usual laugh. It was forced. And the note?" Miss Marple pressed. "Did you read it?" "Only a glimpse. It said, 'This will be your end, mailed from beyond.' I thought it was some cruel prank, but he wouldn't discuss it. He locked it away and told me to leave." Miss Marple nodded, her needles resuming their rhythm. "You must know a great deal about Sir Reginald's affairs. Did he have enemies?" Lydia hesitated, her lips thinning. "He was a hard man in business. Mr. Thornton, his partner, argued with him often over accounts, and there were personal tensions with his wife." Miss Marple asked softly. Lydia's eyes flickered. "I don't gossip, Miss Marple." But Sir Reginald was not blind to Lady Hargrove's friendships. Miss Marple smiled. "Of course, loyalty is such a rare flower. Tell me, did Sir Reginald ever mention his will to you?" "He dictated a letter about it last week," Lydia said carefully, "to his solicitor, Mr. Pettigrew. He was considering changes, but he didn't share details." Miss Marple thanked her and rose, her mind already turning over the threads of the case. A parcel sent by the victim, a note predicting death, a household simmering with secrets. It was a tapestry as intricate as her knitting. But one thread, she felt certain, would lead to the heart of the mystery. That evening, Miss Marple dined with Raymond at his London flat, a modern affair cluttered with manuscripts and art journals, over a simple meal of roast chicken and potatoes. She shared her initial thoughts. The parcel is the key, Raymond. It was meant to tell us something, perhaps not what the killer intended. Raymond leaned forward, his fork paused. You think Hargrove sent it to expose someone, or to protect himself, she said. A man who suspects betrayal might take such a step. But the blood that is what puzzles me. If it was his, how did it get there before he died? And if it wasn't? Raymond's eyes widened. You think it's a frame? I think, Miss Marple said, sipping her tea, that people are rarely as clever as they believe. Like young Tommy in the village, who thought he could hide his theft of Mrs. Price's apples by blaming the grocer's boy. The truth always leaves a trace. She retired early, her mind buzzing with possibilities. The Hargrove mansion was a microcosm of greed, jealousy, and ambition, not unlike St. Mary Mead, where a whispered rumor could unravel a life. As she drifted to sleep, she pictured the parcel, its blood-stained contents, a message from a man who had, perhaps unwittingly, mailed his own doom, but who had ensured it reached its deadly destination. That was the question that would guide her, as surely as her needles followed the pattern of her wool. Chapter 2. The arrival in London. The train from St. Mary Mead to London had been a soothing interlude for Miss Jane Marple. Its rhythmic clatter, a counterpoint to the tangle of thoughts weaving through her mind. She sat by the window, her knitting bag nestled beside her, the pale blue wool in her hands forming neat rows as the countryside gave way to the sprawling edges of the city. The morning was crisp, with a sky like polished glass, and the faint scent of coal smoke lingered in the air. To an onlooker, she might have appeared a frail, elderly spinster, her white hair tucked beneath a sensible hat, her eyes half closed as if dozing. But Miss Marple was far from idle. Her mind was as active as the needles in her fingers, piecing together the fragments of Raymond's tale about Sir Reginald Hargrove and his peculiar fatal parcel. Paddington Station greeted her with its usual clamour, porters shouting, engines hissing, and the hurried footsteps of city folk. Inspector Craddock was waiting on the platform, his broad shoulders and neatly pressed suit a reassuring presence amid the chaos. He tipped his hat, a gesture that carried both courtesy and a trace of exasperation. Miss Marple, he said, taking her suitcase, I trust the journey was pleasant. I must warn you, though this case is a thorny one. The press are circling like vultures, and the Hargrove family are about as cooperative as a nest of hornets. My dear Inspector, Miss Marple replied, her voice as gentle as a summer breeze. Thornier puzzles have bloomed in St. Mary Mead, and hornets, you know, are only dangerous when provoked. Shall we proceed to the scene? Craddock led her to a police car, and they drove through London's bustling streets, past horse-drawn cabs and motor cars, the city a tapestry of old and new. Miss Marple observed the passing faces clerks, gentlemen in bowlers each, a story unto themselves, each capable of secrets. People are much the same everywhere, she remarked, almost to herself. In a village or a city, they carry their motives in their pockets, like loose change. Glanced at her, his lips twitching. You'll find plenty of loose change in the Hargrove household, I wager. They're rich, but not a happy lot. The Hargrove mansion on Kensington Gardens loomed into view, its Georgian elegance a stark contrast to the grim purpose of their visit. Its tall windows gleamed like watchful eyes, and the iron gates stood sentinel over a gravel drive. As they stepped out, Miss Marple noted the manicured lawn, the roses trimmed with military precision. A house that speaks of control, she murmured. But control, Inspector, is often an illusion. Parsons, the butler, greeted them at the door, his face as impassive as a marble bust. His black suit was immaculate, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "This way, Inspector, madam," he said, leading them through a grand hall adorned with portraits of stern-faced Hargroves, their gazes heavy with ancestral judgment. The study, where Sir Reginald had met his end, was a sanctuary of masculine opulence. Mahogany panels lined the walls, and a massive oak desk dominated the center, its surface cluttered with an inkstand, a silver cigarette case, and a scattering of papers. Bookshelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes. On industry and history, a Persian rug, now marred by a dark stain, lay beneath the chalk outline of a body. The air held a faint trace of cigar smoke, mingling with the metallic tints of blood that lingered despite the efforts of the housemaid. "Here's where we found him," Craddock said, gesturing to the outline. "Stabbed once, straight through the heart, with that letter opener from the parcel. The doors were bolted from the inside to heavy bolts, top and bottom, windows latched, no sign of tampering. The only way in or out was through the keyhole. And that's a stretch, even for a ghost." Miss Marple stepped forward, her steps light but deliberate, her eyes scanning every detail. The desk held the remnants of the parcel, a torn envelope of thick cream paper, addressed in a bold hand to Sir Reginald Hargrove. The postmark, clear as day, Reed Dorking, Surrey, dated 2 days prior. Beside it lay a crumpled sheet of foolscap, the note itself now in police custody, but Craddock had transcribed it. "This will be your end. Mailed from beyond." Beyond, Miss Marple mused, her fingers brushing the envelope, a theatrical choice of words. And the letter opener, was it distinctive? "Very," Craddock said, producing a photograph from his notebook. The opener was silver, its handle engraved with an intricate crest, a lion rampant, the Hargrove family emblem. "It's part of a desk set, one of a kind. Miss Black, the secretary, says it was always on his desk until it went missing a few days before the parcel arrived." Miss Marple nodded, her gaze drifting to the windows. They were tall and narrow, their latches old but sturdy, the glass unmarred. She tested one, finding it firm, though the frame showed signs of age, the wood slightly swollen from years of London damp. "A locked room is only as secure as its weakest point," she said softly, "and weaknesses, Inspector, are not always in the woodwork." Craddock frowned, following her gaze. "You think someone got in here? We checked for scratches, tool marks, nothing." "Not yet," she replied, her tone mild but her eyes sharp. "Tell me about the parcel's arrival. Who handled it?" "Miss Black was with him when it came," Craddock said, flipping through his notes. "Delivered by the Morning Post, around 11. She says Hargrove opened it, read the note, and went pale. Then he laughed it off, called it a damned fool prank, and locked it in the desk drawer. Sent her out and stayed in here alone. And the next morning," Miss Marple prompted, "Parsons found him at 7, when he brought the morning coffee. Door was bolted, so he had to break it down. Hargrove was slumped over the desk, the opener in his chest. No sign of a struggle, papers undisturbed, chair in place." Miss Marple moved to the desk, her fingers tracing the edge of the drawer. It was locked, but the key was in Craddock's possession, a small brass thing that gleamed dully. She opened it, revealing a neat array of pens, a ledger, and a few sealed envelopes. "A man who locks a threat away," she said, "is a man who fears it, even if he laughs." She turned to the fireplace, its grate cold and filled with ash. A faint mark on the hearth caught her arduous smudge, as if something had been dragged. "Did you examine this?" she asked. Craddock nodded. "Just ash." Hargrove smoked cigars. "And the maid says he was careless with the ashes." "Careless," Miss Marple echoed, her lips pursing. "Or perhaps someone else was. I should like to see the rest of the house, Inspector, and meet those who shared it with Sir Reginald. A household, you know, is like a village Poncombe on the surface, but full of currents beneath." The drawing room was a study in contrasts to the sombre study. Its walls were clad in pale silk, its furniture delicate and gilded as if designed to soothe the eye after the weight of the Hargrove legacy. Lady Evelyn Hargrove sat by a window, a vision in widow's black, though the cut of her dress was more Parisian than mourning. Her auburn hair was swept up, and a single pearl pendant gleamed at her throat. She rose as they entered, her movements graceful but her eyes wary. "Inspector Craddock," she said, her voice low and musical, and, "Miss Marple, is it? Raymond West spoke of you. I hope you can make sense of this tragedy." "I hope so too, Lady Hargrove," Miss Marple said, settling into a chair with her knitting bag at her feet. "It must be a dreadful shock. Tell me, when did you last see your husband?" Lady Evelyn's fingers tightened on her handkerchief. "The evening before. Before it happened, he was in his study, working late as usual. We dined separately. He was preoccupied with business troubles." "Troubles?" Miss Marple asked, her needles clicking softly. "Reginald was always clashing with his partners," Lady Evelyn said, her gaze drifting to the window. "Mr. Thornton, in particular. He thought someone was mismanaging funds at the company. It made him distant." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes noting the slight tremor in Lady Evelyn's hand. "And the parcel, you see it?" "No," Lady Evelyn said quickly. "He mentioned it at dinner. Said it was some silly joke. I didn't think much of it." Before Miss Marple could press further, Edgar Hargrove entered, his lanky frame slouched in a rumpled jacket. His dark eyes were shadowed, and his hands bore traces of paint, as if he'd come straight from his easel. "This is a waste of time," he said, glaring at Craddock. "Father's dead, and you're poking around like it's a parlor game." "Mr. Hargrove," Miss Marple said gently, "grief takes many forms. Yours seems rather angry. Was your father unkind to you?" Edgar's jaw tightened. "Unkind? He was a bully. Thought my painting was a childish hobby. Cut my allowance to force me into his business. And now I hear he was changing his will to give everything to Amelia." "That's not true, Amelia." Hargrove's voice cut through the room as she entered, her heels clicking on the parquet floor. She was a striking woman, her features sharp and her posture rigid with indignation. Her tailored coat suggested a recent outing, and her eyes blazed with defiance. "Father valued my sense, Edgar. You can't blame him for wanting the business in capable hands." "Capable?" Edgar sneered. "You mean Victor's hands? Father was buying your fiancé's loyalty with a fat dowry." Miss Marple's needles paused. "Mr. Victor Lang, I presume. Your fiancé, Miss Hargrove." Amelia nodded, her cheeks flushing. "Yes, he's a banker, a partner at Barclays. Father respected him, saw him as the future of the firm." "And where was Mr. Lang last night?" Miss Marple asked, her tone as mild as a summer afternoon. "With me," Amelia said firmly. "We were at the Savoy, dining with clients. We returned here around midnight." Craddock made a note. "We'll confirm that. Anyone else see anything unusual that night?" Parsons, who had lingered by the door, cleared his throat. "If I may, sir, the house was quiet. I checked the doors at 10, as always." Sir Reginald was in his study, and I heard no disturbances. Miss Marple's eyes flicked to the maid, Elsie, who hovered with a tray of tea. The girl's hands shook as she poured, and a cup rattled in its saucer. "Elsie, dear," Miss Marple said kindly, "you seem nervous. Did something trouble you yesterday?" Elsie's eyes widened, darting to Lady Evelyn before dropping to the tray. "No, ma'am, just—" Sir Reginald was upset after the parcel came. I heard him pacing in the study, talking to himself. "Talking," Miss Marple prompted. "What did he say?" "Couldn't make it out, ma'am. Just muttering, like he was angry." Craddock interjected. "We've questioned the staff. No one else heard anything. The house was locked up tight." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Locks, like promises, are only as strong as those who keep them." After the interviews, Miss Marple requested a tour of the house. Parsons led them through opulent rooms, a dining hall with a chandelier like a frozen waterfall, a library smelling of leather and dust, and the attic studio where Edgar painted. The studio was a chaos of canvases, some vivid with abstract slashes of color, others dark and brooding. "He's talented," Miss Marple remarked, studying a half-finished portrait of a stern-faced man who resembled Sir Reginald. "But anger colors his work, doesn't it?" Craddock grunted. "Anger colors this whole family. I'm starting to think one of them sent that parcel to scare him, and it went too far." "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, her eyes lingering on a paint-stained rag. "But fear is a poor motive for murder. Greed, jealousy, betrayal, those are stronger threads." They descended to the office, where Lydia Black was sorting papers with mechanical precision. Her plain face was composed, but her fingers betrayed a slight tremor as she met Miss Marple's gaze. "Miss Black," Miss Marple said, settling into a chair, "you seem a woman of great discretion. Sir Reginald trusted you with his correspondence." "Yes," Lydia said, her voice steady but low. "I handled his letters, his appointments. He was particular about details." "And the parcel," Miss Marple continued, "did it arrive with the usual post?" Lydia nodded. "The postboy brought it at 11. I gave it to Sir Reginald myself. He opened it, saw the opener and the note, and he changed. He tried to laugh, but his hands shook. He locked it in the drawer and told me to leave." "Did he often receive odd packages?" Miss Marple asked. "No, never. He was a man of routine. This was unsettling." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. "Unsettling things often reveal the truth, Miss Black. Did Sir Reginald confide in you about his family?" Lydia hesitated, her lips thinning. "He spoke of disappointments. Edgar's refusal to join the business, Lady Hargrove's distractions. He was proud of Amelia, though, said she had his head for figures, and his will." Miss Marple asked, her tone casual. Lydia's eyes flickered. "He mentioned it once, a week ago. Said he was meeting his solicitor to make changes." "He didn't." "Say what?" Miss Marple thanked her and rose, her mind cataloguing every word, every glance. As they left the office, Craddock muttered, "She knows more than she's letting on." "Most people do," Miss Marple replied. "Like Mrs. Baker in the village, who knew all about the vicar's lost watch, but kept quiet to protect her son. Secrets have a way of slipping out, Inspector." That afternoon, Miss Marple and Craddock visited the post office where the parcel had been delivered. The clerk, a harried man with ink-stained cuffs, confirmed it had come through the usual channels. Nothing odd about it, he said. Posted in Dorking, arrived on time. Addressed in Sir Reginald's hand, no mistake. Miss Marple examined a sample of Hargrove's handwriting from a ledger Craddock provided. The bold, looping script matched the envelope perfectly. And yet, she said, handwriting can be borrowed, like a neighbour's garden tools. I wonder who had access to Sir Reginald's desk. Back at the mansion, Craddock received a call from the forensic team. Miss Marple, he said, his voice tight. The blood on the opener, it's Hargrove's, no question. But here's the twist. It was dry, hours old, before he was killed. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed behind her spectacles. Hours old. Then the parcel was more than a threat, it was a rehearsal. Someone planned this with care, Inspector. And care, you know, is a double-edged blade. As they parted for the day, Miss Marple felt the weight of the mystery settle around her, like a shawl against the evening chill. The Hargrove mansion was a maze of motives, each resident a thread in a tapestry of deceit. The parcel, with its grim promise, was the needle that had pierced the heart of it all. But who had threaded it, and why? That was the question that would guide her as surely as her knitting followed its pattern. Chapter 3. The family circled the Hargrove mansion. For all its grandeur, seemed to Miss Jane Marple to hum with an undercurrent of discord, like a village choir where every singer struck a different note. The morning after her arrival in London, she sat in the drawing room, her knitting bag at her side, the pale blue wool in her hands forming a pattern as intricate as the puzzle before her. The room was a delicate contrast to the sombre study where Sir Reginald Hargrove had met his end. Its silk-clad walls glowed in the soft light, and a crystal vase of hothouse lilies perfumed the air. Yet the elegance was marred by the tension that hung like a mist, thickening with each new face that entered. Inspector Craddock stood by the mantel, his notebook open, his expression one of patient determination. He had agreed to let Miss Marple sit in on the family interviews, though his raised eyebrow suggested he still found her presence more curious than essential. The Hargroves are a prickly lot, he warned her quietly as they waited. Each. One's got a grievance, and none of them seem keen to share. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, a rhythmic counterpoint to the ticking of a gilt clock. Families, Inspector, are like my rose garden, beautiful from a distance, but up close, you see the thorns. I suspect we shall find more than grievances here. The first to appear was Lady Evelyn Hargrove, gliding into the room with the poise of a stage actress. Her morning dress, though sombre in colour, was cut with a flair that spoke of Paris rather than grief. Her auburn hair was pinned elegantly, and her eyes, though red-rimmed, were sharp with calculation. She sank onto a chaise longue, her lace handkerchief fluttering like a wounded bird. "This is a nightmare," she said, her voice trembling just enough to invite sympathy. Reginald was not an easy man, but to die so horribly, who could be so cruel? Miss Marple looked up from her knitting, her gaze gentle but piercing. Cruelty, Lady Hargrove, often wears a familiar face. When did you last speak with your husband? Lady Evelyn's fingers tightened on her handkerchief. The evening before it happened. He was in his study, as usual, buried in his papers. We barely spoke. He was preoccupied, always preoccupied. Something about discrepancies at the company. He suspected someone was betraying him. Betraying. Miss Marple echoed, her tone as mild as a summer breeze. A strong word. Did he name this betrayer? No, Lady Evelyn said quickly, too quickly. He was vague, as he often was with me. Business was his world, not mine." Miss Marple's needles paused, just for a moment. "And the parcel, the one with the letter opener, did he show it to you?" Lady Evelyn shook her head, her pearl pendant catching the light. "He mentioned it at dinner, said it was some foolish prank. I thought nothing of it. Reginald was always getting odd letters, disgruntled workers, rival firms. He laughed them off. Yet this one he locked away," Miss Marple said, her eyes meeting Lady Evelyn's. "Not the action of a man unconcerned, wouldn't you say?" Lady Evelyn flushed, her composure wavering. "I suppose he was more upset than he let on, but he never confided in me." Before Miss Marple could press further, the door swung open, admitting Edgar Hargrove. He was a lanky figure, his dark hair falling over his eyes, his jacket rumpled and stained with flecks of paint. His expression was one of barely concealed resentment, as if the world had conspired against him. He slumped into a chair without invitation, ignoring his mother's disapproving glance. "This is a farce," he said, his voice sharp. "Father's dead, and you're sitting here knitting while the killer walks free." Miss Marple smiled faintly, her needles resuming their rhythm. "Knitting, Mr. Hargrove, gives one time to think. And I am thinking about your father. He was not kind to you, I gather." Edgar's eyes narrowed. "Kind? He was a tyrant. Thought my art was a waste of time. Said I'd never amount to anything unless I joined his precious company. He cut my allowance to starve me into submission. And now I hear he was rewriting his will to cut me out entirely." Lady Evelyn gasped. "Edgar, that's not true. Your father loved you, in his way." "His way," Edgar spat, "was to control us all. He dangled his money like a noose, and you know it, Mother." Miss Marple's gaze flicked between them, noting the flush on Lady Evelyn's cheeks, the defiance in Edgar's posture. "A will can stir strong feelings," she said softly. "Tell me, Mr. Hargrove, where were you the night your father died?" "In my studio," Edgar said, his tone sullen. "Painting. I didn't come down till morning, when Parsons raised the alarm, alone." Miss Marple asked, her voice as gentle as a lullaby. Edgar hesitated, his fingers twitching. "Yes, no one else was up there." Craddock made a note, his pencil scratching loudly in the quiet room. "We'll check the studio," he said. "Any paints or tools missing? Anything that could have been used to tamper with that parcel?" Edgar's jaw tightened. "I don't tamper with parcels. I paint. That's all." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes lingering on his paint-stained hands. "Art is a powerful outlet, Mr. Hargrove. It reveals what the heart hides. I should like to see your work sometime." Edgar snorted, but said nothing, his gaze dropping to the floor. Amelia Hargrove entered next, her arrival announced by the sharp click of her heels. She was a striking contrast to her brother, poised, purposeful, her tailored suit as crisp as her manner. Her dark hair was swept back, and her eyes, though tired, burned with a fierce intelligence. She carried a small handbag, which she set down with deliberate care. "Inspector, Miss Marple," she said, nodding to each. "I hope you're making progress. This family can't bear much more strain." "We are doing our best, Miss Hargrove," Miss Marple said, her needles clicking steadily. "Your father's death is a puzzle, but puzzles have solutions. Tell me, what was your relationship with him like?" Amelia's lips curved into a tight smile. "Father and I understood each other. He saw I had his mind for business. Unlike Edgar, he was grooming me to take over parts of the company, especially after my engagement to Victor Lang. Father thought Victor's banking connections would strengthen the firm. Victor Lang, Miss Marple repeated, her tone thoughtful. Your fiancé, and where was he the night of the murder? With me, Amelia said firmly. We were at the Savoy, dining with clients from Barclays. We returned here around midnight. Father was already in his study, and I didn't disturb him. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. A late evening, and you saw nothing unusual when you returned. Amelia hesitated, her fingers brushing her handbag. The house was quiet. I heard Father's gramophone playing I think he often worked late to music. Craddock glanced up from his notebook. And this Victor Langany, reason he'd have a grudge against your father? None, Amelia said, her voice sharp. Father admired Victor. They were planning a merger, a way to secure the company's future. Miss Marple nodded, her needles never faltering. Mergers and marriages both require trust. And trust. Miss Hargrove is so easily misplaced. The door opened again, and Elsie, the maid, entered with a tea tray, her movements hesitant. Her plain face was pale, and her hands trembled as she set down the cups. Miss Marple watched her closely, noting the way her eyes darted to Lady Evelyn, then to the floor. Elsie dear, she said kindly, you were here when the parcel arrived, weren't you? Elsie nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, ma'am. I took it from the postboy and gave it to Miss Black. Sir Reginald opened it in the study. And how did he seem? Miss Marple asked, her tone as warm as a fireside chat. Upset, ma'am, Elsie said, twisting her apron. He didn't say much, just stared at the opener and the note. Then he told Miss Black to leave and locked the door. Craddock leaned forward. Did you hear anything later that day? Voices, footsteps. Elsie shook her head. No, sir. I was in the kitchen most of the evening, but Sir Reginald was pacing. I heard the floorboards creak through the ceiling. Miss Marple's needles paused, just for a moment. Pacing is a sign of a troubled mind. Thank you, Elsie. You've been most helpful. As Elsie retreated, Lady Evelyn rose, her handkerchief fluttering. If there's nothing else, Inspector, I have a charity meeting to prepare for. This house feels like a tomb. Of course, Craddock said, but his eyes followed her as she left. Her steps a little too quick for a grieving widow. Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her mind turning over the morning's revelations. Lady Evelyn's polished grief, Edgar's simmering anger, Amelia's fierce loyalty to her fiancé. Each was a thread in a tapestry that was far from complete. The parcel, with its blood-stained opener and cryptic note, was the needle that had pierced the heart of this family, but who had guided it? She thought of Mrs. Green in St. Mary Mead, whose tearful tales of a lost brooch had masked her sons. Theft. People, she knew, hid their truths behind their tears, their anger, their silences. Inspector, she said, rising, I should like to see the study again. There is something about that room, something we've overlooked. Craddock nodded, though his expression was skeptical. You think there's more to find? We've combed it top to bottom. Rooms, like people, keep their secrets in plain sight, Miss Marple said, her voice soft but certain. And secrets, Inspector, are like weeds, they thrive until you pull them out. They returned to the study, where the air still held the faint temps of blood and cigar smoke. Miss Marple moved slowly, her eyes sweeping over the desk, the bookshelves, the windows. She paused by the fireplace, where the smudge she had noticed. Yesterday seemed slightly more pronounced in the morning light. She knelt, her gloved fingers brushing the hearth. Ash, she murmured, but not just ash. There's a trace of something else, wax perhaps. Craddock crouched beside her, frowning. Wax from a candle. Or a seal, Miss Marple said, her eyes narrowing. Sir Reginald was a man of old-fashioned habits, was he not? He might have sealed his letters with wax, Craddock called. For Parsons, who confirmed that Sir Reginald kept a sealing kit in his desk. The drawer revealed a small box of red wax sticks, one partially used, its edge uneven. Could someone have used this to tamper with the parcel? Craddock asked. Possibly. Miss Marple said, standing. A seal can be broken and remade, just as a lock can be picked. I wonder if the parcel was opened before it reached Sir Reginald Dond. By whom? As they left the study, Craddock's telephone rang. He listened intently, his face tightening. That was the lab, he said, hanging up. The blood on the opener, it's definitely Hargrove's, but it was applied hours before his death, likely the day the parcel was posted. And there's something else, a trace of theatrical paint, the kind used in stage makeup. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. Theatrical paint. How very interesting. Like the time young Tommy in the village painted his hands to fake an injury and avoid school. Someone, Inspector, wanted this murder to look like a performance. Craddock rubbed his chin. Edgar's an artist. He'd have access to paints. Perhaps, Miss Marple said, her tone thoughtful. But artists are not the only ones who stage dramas. We must look closer, Inspector, at the family, the staff, the shadows they cast. As they stepped into the hall, Miss Marple felt the weight of the mystery deepen. The Hargrove family was a circle of secrets, each member bound by their own desires and fears. The parcel had been a message, but its true sender remained hidden, like a figure in a fog. She thought of the village gossips in St. Mary Mead, whose whispers had unravelled many a lie. Here, in this grand house, the whispers were silent, but no less deadly. Chapter 4. The business rivals, the London morning was cloaked in a fine mist, the kind that softened the edges of Kensington's grand facades, but could not dull the sharpness of Miss Jane Marple's observations. She sat in a hansom cab beside Inspector Craddock, her knitting bag tucked neatly at her feet, the pale blue wool in her hands moving with the quiet precision of a clock's gears. The cab's wheels clattered over the cobblestones as they made their way to the offices of Hargrove Industries, a monolithic building of grey stone that loomed over Threadneedle Street like a stern patriarch. Miss Marple's thoughts, however, were not on the city's bustle, but on the tangled web of the Hargrove household, where every word and glance seemed to conceal a deeper truth. Sir Reginald's business was his empire, Craddock said, breaking the silence as the cab slowed. He built it from a single mill to half the steel trade in England, but it made him enemies. We're here to meet his partners, Mr. Thornton, the accountant, and Miss Lydia Black, the secretary. Thornton's been vocal about disagreements with Hargrove and Miss Black. Well, she's the one who saw him open that parcel. Miss nodded, her needles clicking softly. Empires, Inspector, are built on loyalty and lost through betrayal. I suspect we shall find both in this office. People are so like my neighbours in St. Mary Mid, ambitious, resentful, and terribly careless with their secrets. The offices of Hargrove Industries were a study in utilitarian grandeur, polished oak floors, high ceilings, and clerks bustling, with ledgers and typewriters. A faint hum of machinery from the nearby factories seeped through the walls, a reminder of the steel that underpinned the family's wealth. They were ushered into a boardroom where Mr. Harold Thornton awaited a Burly man in his 50s with a florid face and a moustache that bristled like a hedgehog. His suit was expensive but ill-fitting, as if he resented the formality it imposed. He rose as they entered, his handshake firm but his eyes wary. "Inspector Craddock," he said, his voice booming with forced joviality. "And this must be the Lady Raymond West mentioned. Miss Marple, is it? I hope you're not here to waste my time. I've a business to run, even with Hargrove gone." Miss Marple settled into a chair, her knitting bag at her side. "Time, Mr. Thornton, is never wasted when seeking truth. You were close to Sir Reginald, I understand, yet not always in agreement." Thornton's moustache twitched. "Close, in business, perhaps. Reginald was a hard man, brilliant, but ruthless. He accused me of mismanaging accounts last month, said funds were missing. Utter nonsense. I was at a meeting across town when he died dozens of witnesses." Miss Marple's needles clicked, a steady rhythm against the tension in the room. "Accusations can sting, Mr. Thornton. Were you fond of Sir Reginald?" "Fond." Thornton snorted, leaning back in his chair. "He was my partner, not my friend. He hoarded control like a miser with gold. Lately, he was obsessed with enemies, said someone was sabotaging the company. I told him to look at his own family first." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "Families can be troublesome, indeed. Did he mention his will?" Thornton hesitated, his fingers drumming on the table. He hinted at changes. Wanted to secure the business for Amelia, his daughter. Thought her fiancé that Langfellow could stabilize things. Me. I'd have been happy to buy him out, but he wouldn't hear of it. Craddock made a note, his pencil scratching loudly. "Where were you the day the parcel arrived, Mr. Thornton?" "In Manchester," Thornton said promptly. "Negotiating with suppliers. I didn't return till evening. Ask my secretary, she booked the tickets." Miss Marple nodded, her gaze drifting to the window, where the mist curled against the glass. A busy man, always on the move. And yet, news travels faster than trains. "Did you hear about the parcel before Sir Reginald's death?" Thornton's eyes narrowed. "Not till the police called." "Why?" "Oh, no reason," Miss Marple said. Mildly, only that gossip is like a weed, it spreads where you least expect it. As Thornton excused himself, citing a meeting, Miss Marple and Craddock were led to a smaller office where Lydia Black sat at a typewriter, her fingers poised, but idle. She was a plain woman, her brown hair pulled into a tight bun, her grey dress as unassuming as her manner. Yet her eyes, when they met Miss Marple's, held a quiet intensity, like a still pond with unseen depths. "Miss Black," Miss Marple began, settling into a chair, "you've been most helpful already. But I wonder if you could tell us more about Sir Reginald's state of mind. He trusted you, I think." Lydia's hands folded neatly in her lap. "He relied on me, yes. I managed his correspondence, his appointments. He was particular everything had to be just so. But lately, he was distracted. He spoke of betrayal. Said someone close was undermining him." "Close?" Miss Marple asked, her needles clicking. "In the business or at home?" Lydia hesitated, her lips thinning. "Both, I think. He argued with Mr. Thornton about accounts, and with Lady Hargrove about personal matters. He didn't confide details, but he was tense. The parcel only made it worse." Craddock leaned forward. "You saw him open it. Did anything else strike you about it?" Lydia's fingers twitched, as if resisting the urge to fidget. The envelope was his stationery cream, with his crest. The handwriting looked like his, but I don't know. It felt wrong, he read. The note went pale, then laughed too loudly, like he was trying to convince himself it was nothing. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Wrong, you say, in what way? Lydia bit her lip. The ink, perhaps. It was black, but Sir Reginald always used blue for personal notes. I didn't think much of it then, but now. Craddock made another note, and after he locked it away, what did he do? He dictated a letter, Lydia said, to his solicitor, Mr. Pettigrew, about his will. He was vague, said it was urgent. Then he sent me away and stayed in his study. Miss Marple's needles paused. A will is a powerful thing, Miss Black. Did he mention who might benefit? Lydia shook her head. He didn't say, but he was worried about the company said it needed protecting from vultures. Vultures, Miss Marple repeated, softly, a vivid image. Thank you, Miss Black. You've been most illuminating. As they left the office, Craddock muttered, She's hiding something. Did you see how she hesitated about the ink? I did, Miss Marple said, her voice thoughtful, like Mrs. Price in St. Mary Mead, who knew her maid was pilfering, but wouldn't speak for fear of scandal. Loyalty can be a heavy chain, Inspector. They stepped into the street, where the mist had thickened, cloaking the city in a grey veil. Craddock hailed a cab, but Miss Marple paused, her gaze fixed on a newsboy shouting headlines about the Hargrove. Murder, the press are quick, she said. Almost as quick as gossip in a village. Back at the mansion, they were met by Raymond West, who had arrived with fresh news. Aunt Jane Craddock, he said, his eyes alight with excitement. The post office in Dorking sent word. The parcel was definitely posted by Hargrove himself, witnessed by the postmaster, Mr. Wilkins. But here's the odd bit. Wilkins says Hargrove was agitated, muttering about insurance against betrayal. Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile. Insurance, indeed. A man who mails a weapon to himself is either very clever or very desperate. I wonder which Sir Reginald was. Craddock frowned. You think he sent it to trap someone? Or to warn them, Miss Marple said, her needles resuming their rhythm. In my village, old Mr. Carter once hid his savings in a teapot to catch his nephew stealing. The teapot was empty, but the nephew's guilt was plain. Perhaps Sir Reginald played a similar game. They returned to the drawing room, where Amelia Hargrove was waiting, her posture rigid with impatience. Inspector, have you found anything? This uncertainty is unbearable. We're making progress, Craddock said, though his tone lacked conviction. Miss Hargrove, did your father ever mention enemies in the business? Amelia's eyes flickered. He was always clashing with Thornton. Father thought he was skimming profits, though he had no proof. And there were competitors, rival firms, who'd love to see us falter. Miss Marple looked up from her knitting. And Mr. Lang, your fiancé, did he share your father's concerns? Amelia hesitated, her fingers tightening on her handbag. Victor was helping father investigate. They were close, planning a merger to strengthen the company. Victor had no reason to harm him. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes noting the slight flush on Amelia's cheeks. Love and business are such delicate partners, Miss Hargrove. One must be careful where one places one's trust. As Amelia excused herself, Craddock turned to Miss Marple. You're circling something, aren't you? Thornton's alibi. Lydia's hesitation. What's nagging at you? Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. Everything, Inspector. The parcel was a message, but to whom? The blood, the paint, the inkall pieces of a pattern. Like my knitting, it's a matter of finding the right thread to pull. They were interrupted by Parsons, who entered with a grave expression. "Inspector, there's a call from the lab. They've found something new on the letter opener, a trace of wax, matching the kind in Sir Reginald's desk." Miss Marple eyes gleamed. "Wax, again. How very curious. It seems our parcel was handled with care, perhaps too much care. I think, Inspector, we must look closer at those who had access to Sir Reginald's desk and his secrets." As they prepared to leave, Miss Marple felt the mystery tighten around her, like a stitch pulled to snug. The business rivals, the loyal secretary, the family simmering with resentment, was a thread in a tapestry of deceit. The parcel had been a warning, a trap, or perhaps a confession, but its true purpose remained hidden, like a shadow in the mist. She thought of the village postmistress in St. Mary Mead, who knew every letter's sender by the weight of their secrets. Here, in the heart of London, the post had carried a darker message, and Miss Marple was determined to read it. Chapter 5. The Village Connection. The train from London to Dorking wound through the Surrey countryside like a ribbon unfurling across a patchwork quilt of fields and woods. Miss Jane Marple sat by the window, her knitting bag on the seat beside her, the pale blue wool in her hands forming a pattern as serene as the landscape outside. The mist of the city had given way to a clear autumn day, with leaves turning gold and red, and the air carrying the earthy scent of harvest. To the casual observer, she might have seemed a harmless elderly lady enjoying a day trip, her white hair tucked beneath a modest hat, her eyes half closed in contemplation. But Miss Marple's mind was far from idle. It was sifting through the revelations from Hargrove Industries, where rivalries simmered like a pot on a low boil, and secrets clung like cobwebs in the corners. Inspector Craddock had been reluctant to accompany her to the village, citing pressing duties in London, but Miss Marple had insisted gently. "The postmark, Inspector, is a thread we must follow. Letters do not send themselves, and villagers, like families, hold their truths close to the chest." Raymond West had offered to drive her, but she preferred the train, where one could think without interruption, as the stations passed names. Like Leatherhead and Box Hill, she pondered the paradox of the parcel, posted by Sir Reginald himself, yet bearing a message of his doom. It was a riddle that echoed the village scandals of St. Mary Mead, where a misplaced letter could unravel a lifetime of pretense. Dorking was a charming market town, its streets lined with half-timber-bird shops and inns, the North Downs rising like gentle guardians in the distance. Hargrove's retreat, Willow Cottage, lay a mile outside, a cosy thatched dwelling nestled amid rolling hills and hedgerows heavy with blackberries. Miss Marple walked the path from the station, her steps steady, enjoying the crisp air and the distant bleat of sheep. The cottage was picturesque, with climbing roses framing the door and a garden still blooming with late asters. Yet there was a forlorn air about it, as if the house mourned its absent owner. The caretaker, a weathered man named Jenkins, met her at the gate, his cap in hand. Miss Marple. The police rang ahead. Terrible business about Sir Reginald. He only came down weekends, but he loved this place. Said it cleared his head. Miss Marple smiled kindly, her eyes taking in the tidy grounds. A refuge from the city, no doubt. May I look around? I'm particularly interested in his habits here. Jenkins led her inside, where the rooms were furnished in a rustic style, beamed ceilings, a stone fireplace, and shelves of books on history and engineering. The study was small but neat, with a writing desk overlooking the garden. Miss Marple examined it closely, noting the cream stationery in the drawer identical to the parcel's envelope, and a bottle of blue ink, half empty. "Did Sir Reginald write many letters here?" she asked. "Aye," Jenkins said, scratching his head. "He'd sit there evenings, scribbling away. Posted them himself at the village office. Last time he was here, 2 days before. Well, you know, he seemed troubled, pacing about." Miss Marple's fingers brushed the ink bottle. "Troubled, you say? Did he have visitors?" Jenkins nodded. "One that evening gentleman in a dark coat. Arrived by taxi, argued with Sir Reginald in the study. Voices raised, but I couldn't make out words. Left after an hour, looked angry." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "A description, perhaps? Middle-aged, tallish, clean-shaven. Sounded like family called Sir Reginald Reggie once, through the window." "Thank you, Jenkins," Miss Marple said, her mind already turning over this new piece. "You've been most helpful. Now, I think I shall visit the post office." The village post office was a quaint affair, tucked into a corner shop selling stamps, sweets, and newspapers. Mr. Wilkins, the postmaster, was a portly man with spectacles perched on his nose, sorting mail behind the counter. He looked up as Miss Marple entered, the bell tinkling cheerfully. "Good day, ma'am. How can I help?" Miss Marple adjusted her spectacles, her voice mild. "I'm inquiring about a parcel posted here 2 days ago by Sir Reginald Hargrove. You recall it?" Wilkins's face clouded. "Ah, poor Sir Reginald. Yes, he came in himself, around tea time. Dropped it in the box, paid the postage. Seemed agitated, muttered something about insurance against betrayal. I asked if all was well, but he just nodded and left." "Insurance," Miss Marple repeated softly, her needles clicking from her bag, which she'd set on the counter. An odd phrase. Did he say more? "No, ma'am," but he was clutching the parcel tight, like it was precious or dangerous. Addressed to his London office, in his own hand. Miss Marple nodded, her gaze drifting to the stamps displayed. "And the ink on the envelope, was it black or blue?" Wilkins frowned, thinking. "Black, I believe." Unusual for him, he favored blue, but folks change habits. "Thank you, Mr. Wilkins," Miss Marple said, purchasing a stamp as a courtesy. "You have a keen eye, like our postmistress in St. Mary Mead. She notices everything." Stepping outside, Miss Marple paused to admire the village green, where children played and a dog barked lazily. It reminded her of home, where surface calm hid deeper currents. She made her way to the neighbouring cottage, where Mrs. Finch, a plump woman with a flowered apron, was tending her garden. "Mrs. Finch," Miss Marple called over the fence. "I'm looking into Sir Reginald's affairs. Might I have a word?" Mrs. Finch straightened, wiping her hands. "Of course, dear. Dreadful what happened. Come in for tea." Over a pot of strong brew and scones, Mrs. Finch proved a fountain of local lore. Sir Reginald was a quiet sort, kept to himself, but that evening, 2 days back, he had a visitor, a man in a dark coat. They argued something fierce. I heard snatches through the hedge. "You'll regret this, and family honour." Sounded like kin. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes sharp. "Family, you say? Did you see the man?" "Only a glimpse, stall, with a banker's look. Left in a huff, caught the last train to London." Miss Marple's mind raced. A banker, perhaps Victor Lang. How very interesting. And Sir Reginald, did he seem fearful? Mrs. Finch leaned forward, her voice lowering. Agitated, yes. After the visitor left, he paced the garden, muttering, Posted that parcel next day, I think. Jenkins said he was up half the night writing. Thank you, Mrs. Finch, Miss Marple said, rising. Gossip in villages is like manure, it helps things grow. As she walked back to the station, Miss Marple pondered the timeline. Hargrove had posted the parcel himself, agitated, speaking of insurance. The note predicted murder, yet the blood predated death by hours. Perhaps he cut himself deliberately, she murmured, to stage a warning. But why mail it to himself? The train back to London was delayed, giving her time to knit and think. The visitor in the dark coat family, banker-like. Victor Lang fit the bill, engaged to Amelia, involved in the business. Had he argued with Hargrove, then ensured the parcel's deadly fulfillment? Arriving in London, Miss Marple telephoned Raymond from the station. Aunt Jane, he exclaimed. Any luck in Surrey? Some threads, dear, she said. But I need you to check something. Ask Craddock about Victor Lang's whereabouts 2 days before the murder. And the lab report on the blood details, please. Raymond rang back within the hour, his voice excited. Aunt Jane, the lab says the blood on the opener is Hargrove's, but it predates his death by at least 6 hours. Likely from a minor cut, like shaving, and there's residue wax and paint, as before. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. 6 hours. So the blood was on the opener before posting. Hargrove mailed his own evidence, perhaps to expose a plot, but someone turned it against him. Back at the Hargrove mansion, Craddock met her with a grim expression. Miss Marple, we've confirmed Thornton's alibi for But Lydia Black admits she knew about the will changes. Hargrove cut Edgar out entirely, left most to Amelia and the business. Miss Marple nodded, settling into the drawing room with her knitting, and Victor Lang. Craddock flipped his notebook. He claims he was in London, but his secretary says he took a half-day train to Surrey, perhaps. We're checking tickets. Miss Marple's needles clicked. A visit to the cottage, arguing with Reggie. Family honor, betrayal, it fits. Lady Evelyn entered, her face pale. Inspector, must this go on? The funeral is tomorrow. Grief waits for truth. Lady Hargrove, Miss Marple said gently. Your husband's parcel was a cry for help, I think. Did he suspect Victor? Lady Evelyn's eyes widened. Victor, no. Reginald trusted him. They were merging interests. Trust, Miss Marple murmured, is a fragile vase. One crack, and it shatters. As evening fell, Miss Marple retired to her guest room, the city lights twinkling outside. The village connection had woven new strands into the web, a agitated posting, a mysterious visitor, blood that spoke of premeditation, like the time in St. Mary Mead when Mr. Simmons mailed a warning to himself to catch his thieving gardener, only for the gardener to strike first. Here, the stakes were deadly, and the visitor's identity loomed like a shadow over the Hargrove legacy. Chapter 6. The hidden affair, the Hargrove mansion, with its polished surfaces and grand airs, seemed to Miss Jane Marple to be a stage where every actor played their part with practiced care. Yet the script beneath was riddled with unspoken lines. The morning after her return from Dorking, she sat in the drawing room. The pale light of a London dawn filtering through the tall windows, casting shadows that danced like secrets on the silk wallpaper. Her knitting needles moved with a usual quiet rhythm, the pale blue wool forming a pattern as intricate as the motives she was beginning to unravel. The parcel, with its blood-stained letter opener and cryptic note, remained the centerpiece of this grim drama. But the visit to Surrey had added a new thread, a visitor, a family argument, and a hint of betrayal that lingered like the scent of yesterday's roses. Inspector Craddock joined her, his face etched with the weariness of a man wrestling with too many questions and too few answers. He carried a fresh report from the forensic team, his notebook bristling with scribbled notes. "Miss Marple," he said, settling into a chair, "you've got a knack for stirring things up. That wax on the opener matches the ceiling. Wax from Hargrove's desk, and there's a trace of theatrical paint, as you know. But we've got something new, a fibre caught in the wax. Looks like it's from a woman's glove, silk, expensive." Miss Marple's needles paused, just for a moment, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles. "A woman's glove," she murmured. "How very suggestive. In St. Mary Mead, Mrs. Carter lost a silk glove at a church fete, and it turned up in the vicar's study. Quite the scandal, until we learned it was her daughter's, borrowed for mischief. Who, in this household, wears such gloves, Inspector?" Craddock rubbed his chin. "Lady Hargrove, for one. She's got a wardrobe full of finery. Amelia, too, though she's more practical. Lydia Black, doubtful she's too plain for silk. But we're testing the fibre against their things." Miss Marple nodded, her needles resuming their rhythm. "A glove can hide a hand, but not a motive. I think we should speak with the maid, Elsie. Servants, you know, see more than they're meant to, like sparrows in a garden." Elsie was summoned, her plain face pale and her hands twisting in her apron as she stood before them. The drawing room, with its delicate furniture and heavy silences, seemed to overwhelm her, but Miss Marple's gentle smile put her at ease. "Elsie, dear," she began, her voice as soothing as a lullaby, "you've been in this house some time, haven't you? You must know its rhythms, its secrets." Elsie nodded, her eyes darting to the door. "3 years, ma'am. I keep things. Tidy, serve tea, that sort of thing." "And you notice things," Miss Marple continued, her needles clicking softly. "Tell me, did you ever see Lady Hargrove with anyone unexpected? A friend, perhaps, who visited often?" Elsie's cheeks flushed, and she glanced at Craddock, who leaned forward, his pencil poised. "Well, ma'am," she said hesitantly, "there was Mr. Thornton, from the company. He'd come by sometimes, when Sir Reginald was at the office. They'd meet in the morning room, or at a tea shop in Knightsbridge. I overheard them once, laughing, close-liked." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Close like you say. And did Sir Reginald know of these meetings?" Elsie bit her lip. "I think so, ma'am. Last week, I heard them arguing, Sir Reginald and Lady Hargrove, in the study. He shouted something about disloyalty, and that man," she cried, "said it was over." Craddock made a note, his expression grim. "An affair, then. Thornton's got motive if Hargrove was onto him. Did you see anything else, Elsie? Anything about that parcel?" Elsie shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "No, sir, just that Sir Reginald was upset after it came. Kept pacing, muttering about proof. I thought he meant the business." "Thank you, Elsie," Miss Marple said kindly. "You've been very brave to speak. Secrets are heavy, aren't they?" As Elsie scurried away, Craddock turned to Miss Marple. "An affair with Thornton, that's a new angle. If Hargrove knew, it could explain the betrayal he mentioned in Dorking." Miss Marple nodded, her fingers deftly working the wool. "Betrayal in love is as potent as betrayal in business, Inspector. But we must be careful. People like to hide their hearts, just as they hide their crimes. I think we should speak with Lady Hargrove again." Lady Evelyn was found in the conservatory, tending to a collection of orchids with a care that seemed at odds with her polished exterior. Her black dress was elegant, but her eyes were shadowed, as if sleep had eluded her. She looked up as they entered, her expression guarded. "Inspector, Miss Marple," she said, setting down her pruning shears. "I hope you're closer to finding Reginald's killer. This house is suffocating." Miss Marple settled onto a wicker chair, her knitting bag at her side. "Grief is a heavy burden, Lady Hargrove, but so is guilt. Tell me, were you and your husband happy?" Lady Evelyn's fingers froze on an orchid stem. "Happy? We were married, Miss Marple. Happiness is not always the point. Reginald was consumed by his work, and I had my charities, my social duties, and Mr. Thornton." Miss Marple asked, her voice gentle but unyielding. "Was he part of those duties?" Lady Evelyn's face paled, her lips parting in a silent gasp. "What are you implying?" "Only that friendships can complicate matters," Miss Marple said, her needles clicking. "Sir Reginald suspected something, didn't he? An argument, perhaps, about loyalty." Lady Evelyn's hands trembled, and she sank onto a bench. "It was nothing serious," she said, her voice low. "A flirtation, long over. Reginald confronted me last week, and I swore it was finished. He believed me, or so I thought." Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her gaze was keen. "And the parcel, did it change him?" "He was rattled," Lady Evelyn admitted. "He showed me the note, said it was a cruel joke. But he locked himself away after that, wouldn't talk." Craddock interjected, his tone brisk. "Lady Hargrove, where were you the night of the murder?" "Precisely, upstairs," she said quickly, "preparing for a charity luncheon. I retired early, heard nothing." Miss Marple nodded, her needles never faltering. "Thank you, Lady Hargrove. Truth, like a flower, blooms in its own time." As they left the conservatory, Edgar Hargrove appeared in the hall, his paint-stained fingers clutching a cigarette. He had clearly been eavesdropping, his eyes blazing with contempt. "So, Mother's little secret is out," he sneered. "Father knew about her and Thornton. I saw a letter from his solicitor, talk of divorce, cutting her out of the will." Miss Marple tilted her head, her expression serene. "A letter, Mr. Hargrove? How convenient that you saw it. Where is it now?" Edgar flushed, his cigarette trembling. "I don't know. It was on his desk, then gone, probably burned." Craddock made a note. "We'll search for it. Anything else you've seen that you'd care to share?" Edgar glared but said nothing, stalking off toward his studio. Miss Marple watched him go, her mind turning over the new revelations. "A divorce," she murmured. "That would change the pattern, wouldn't it? Like Mrs. Green in St. Mary. Mead, whose husband threatened to leave her over a rumored affair, only for the rumor to be a lie, spread by her own sister." Craddock raised an eyebrow. "You think Edgar's lying about the letter?" "I think," Miss Marple said, "that people lie when they're afraid, or when they want to stir the pot. We must look at that desk again, Inspector." Back in the study, the air was still heavy with the ghost of cigar smoke and tragedy. Miss Marple examined the desk drawers, finding no trace of a solicitor's letter, but she noted the sealing wax, again red, with a faint sheen where it had been handled. "The wax on the opener," she said, "and now a fiber from a glove. Someone was careless, or perhaps they meant to be found." Craddock's telephone rang, and he stepped aside to answer it. When he returned, his face was grim. The labs confirmed the fiber bits from a silk glove, likely Lady Hargrove's, and Victor Lang's alibi for the Surrey visit is shaky. No train ticket, and his secretary says he was out that afternoon. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. Victor Lang, arguing with Reggie in Dorking. A glove, perhaps dropped in haste. The threads are tightening, Inspector, but the pattern is not yet clear. As they prepared to leave, Miss Marple overheard Amelia in the hall, her voice low and urgent as she spoke to someone on the telephone. Victor, you must tell them the truth. Father trusted you. Don't let this ruin us. The call ended abruptly, and Amelia's footsteps faded. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly as she stepped into the hall. Love and trust, she said to Craddock, are such fragile threads. Like my knitting, one wrong move can unravel everything. I think, Inspector, we must speak with Mr. Lang next. The day drew to a close, the mansion settling into an uneasy silence. Miss Marple felt the mystery coiling tighter, like a stitch pulled taut. The affair, the glove, the missing letter each, was a piece of a tapestry woven with deceit. In St. Mary Mead, she had seen how a whispered rumour could topple a family. Here, in the heart of London, the whispers were louder, and the stakes far deadlier. The parcel, she knew, was more than a threat. It was a mirror, reflecting the hidden sins of those it touched. Chapter 7. The alibi cracks the Hargrove mansion. With its air of stifled opulence, seemed to Miss Jane Marple to pulse with the quiet unease of a house where every shadow hid a secret. The late morning light filtered through the tall windows of the drawing room, casting a golden glow on the silk wallpaper, but the warmth did little to dispel the chill of suspicion that hung over the household. Miss Marple sat in her usual chair, her knitting bag at her side, the pale blue wool in her hands, moving with the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. Her needles clicked softly, a counterpoint to the ticking of the gilt clock on the mantel, as she pondered the threads of the mystery. A blood-stained letter opener, a cryptic note, a silk glove, and now a visitor to Dorking who might hold the key to Sir Reginald Hargrove's murder. Inspector Craddock stood by the window, his face etched with the frustration of a man chasing shadows. He held a fresh report from Scotland Yard, his fingers tapping impatiently against the paper. Miss Marple, he said, turning to her, we've hit a snag with Victor Lang's alibi. He claimed he was at the Savoy with Amelia, dining with clients the night of the murder. But the waiter says Lang left early around 9, well before midnight. Said he was fidgety, checking his watch like a man with somewhere to be. Miss Marple's needles paused, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles. Fidgety, you say? Like young Tommy in St. Mary Mead, who kept glancing at his watch when he'd planned to sneak into Mrs. Price's orchard. Where did Mr. Lang say he went after leaving the Savoy? Craddock flipped through his notebook. Back to his flat, he claims. Alone, no one to confirm it. And that Surrey visit's still no train ticket, and his secretary is vague about his whereabouts that afternoon. Miss Marple nodded, her needles resuming their rhythm. A man who slips away from a dinner and cannot account for his time is a man with a secret. I think we should speak with him, Inspector. But first, let us see Miss Hargrove. Her loyalty to her fiancé may be her blind spot. Amelia Hargrove was found in the library, surrounded by leather-bound tomes and the faint scent of old paper. She stood by a window, her tailored coat discarded on a chair, her posture rigid with defiance. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, and her eyes, though tired, burned with a fierce determination. Inspector, she said as they entered, I hope you're not here to waste my time. Victor is innocent. He loved father, and they were planning great things together. Miss Marple settled into a chair, her knitting bag at her feet. Love, Miss Hargrove, is a powerful motive for good or ill. Tell me, how did your father and Mr. Lang get on? No disagreements. Amelia's lips tightened. None worth mentioning. Father saw Victor as the future of the Campania banker with connections to stabilize our finances. They were negotiating a merger, as I told you. Victor had no reason to harm him. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. And yet, Mr. Lang left the Savoy early that night. Did he mention where he went? Amelia's cheeks flushed, her fingers gripping the back of a chair. He said he felt unwell, needed air. He went home. It's not a crime to leave a dinner early. Not a crime, Miss Marple said gently, but a curiosity, like Mrs. Baker in my village, who swore her son was home all evening, only for him to be caught poaching at midnight. Truth, Miss Hargrove, has a way of slipping out. Craddock stepped forward, his tone brisk. Miss Hargrove, we know Victor visited your father in Dorking 2 days before the murder. They argued loudly. What was that about? Amelia's eyes widened, but she recovered quickly. Business, I'm sure. Victor was helping father investigate some financial irregularities. They might have disagreed, but it was professional, not personal. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. Professional disagreements can cut deep, my dear, especially when money and marriage are involved. Did your father ever express doubts about Mr. Lang? Amelia hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. He wondered if Victor was pushing the merger too fast, but he trusted him. He was going to give us his blessing. Thank you, Miss Hargrove, Miss Marple said, rising. You've been most helpful. Trust, you know, is like a stitch. It holds until it doesn't. As Amelia left, her steps quick, Craddock turned to Miss Marple. She's protecting him, isn't she? That hesitation, it's like she's afraid of what we'll find. Fear, Miss Marple said, is a powerful lens. It distorts what we see. Let us speak with Mr. Lang himself. Victor Lang was summoned to the mansion, arriving within the hour. He was a tall man in his 30s, with a banker's polished air, clean-shaven, impeccably dressed, his dark coat tailored to perfection. Yet his eyes were restless, and his hands fidgeted with a gold watch chain, betraying a nervous energy. He stood in the drawing room, his posture stiff, as if bracing for an attack. Mr. Lang, Miss Marple began, her voice as gentle as a summer breeze. You were close to Sir Reginald, I understand. A merger, a marriage grand plans. Yet you left the Savoy early the night he died. Where did you go? Victor's jaw tightened, but his voice was smooth. I wasn't feeling well, a headache. I took a walk, then went home, alone. I didn't see Reginald that night. Craddock's eyes narrowed, and 2 days earlier, in Dorking, witnesses saw you at Willow Cottage, arguing with Hargrove. Care to explain? Victor's fingers stilled on his watch chain. I went to discuss the merger. Reginald was paranoid. Someone was embezzling. He accused me of rushing things, said I was too eager. It got heated, but I left. That's all. Miss Marple's needles clicked. Heated enough to call him Reggie. A family term for a family argument, perhaps. Victor flushed. I might have, in frustration. He was like a father to me. I respected him. And the parcel? Miss Marple continued. The one he posted that day. Did he mention it to you? Victor shook his head, too quickly. No, he was secretive about his correspondence. Said it was business. Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her gaze was piercing. Business, indeed. like Mr. Simmons in my village, who hid his plans in letters to catch a thief, only to find the thief was closer than he thought. Thank you, Mr. Lang. As Victor left, Craddock muttered, he's lying about something. That walk, that argument, no one to back him up. Miss Marple nodded, her needles moving steadily. Lies are like dropped stitches, Inspector. Leave holes in the pattern. I think we should revisit the study. Something about that desk nags at me. They returned to the study, where the air still carried the faint tang of blood and cigar smoke. Miss Marple examined the desk drawers again, her gloved fingers tracing the edges. The sealing wax box was there, its red sticks gleaming, one slightly melted at the tip. She opened another drawer, finding a small stack of envelope scream, with the Hargrove crest. One was addressed in black ink, unlike the blue Hargrove favored. Look here, she said, holding it up. This matches the parcel's envelope. Someone had access to his stationery. Craddock frowned. Anyone in the house could have taken it. But why use black ink? To mislead, Miss Marple said, or to point us to the truth. Like Mrs. Carter's glove, left to incriminate. Her daughter, but planted by another. We must look at the timing, Inspector. Craddock's telephone rang, interrupting their search. He listened, his face tightening. That was the Savoy waiter again, he said, hanging up. He's certain now Victor Lang left at 8:45, not 9 o'clock, and he was carrying a small case, like a briefcase. Could have held the opener. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. A case and a glove. The threads are weaving together, but the pattern is still unclear. I wonder, Inspector, if we might speak with Elsie again. Servants see the small things, briefcases, gloves, hurried exits. Elsie was found in the kitchen, polishing silver with a nervous intensity. She started as they entered, her hands trembling. Ma'am, sir, she said, I've told you. All I know, Miss Marple smiled kindly. I'm sure you have, dear. But sometimes we see things we don't realize matter. Did you notice Mr. Lang with anything unusual that night? A case, perhaps. Elsie's eyes widened. A case, aye. Yes, he had a small one when he and Miss Amelia came back. He set it by the hall table, then took it upstairs. Craddock made a note. And the glove, did you ever see Lady Hargrove's silk gloves lying about? Elsie nodded slowly. She leaves them everywhere, on the hall table, in the drawing room. I found one in the study last week, but I put it back in her room, Miss Marple's needles clicked. Thank you, Elsie. You're a treasure, like our maid in St. Mary Mead, who always knew where the vicar's spectacles went. As they left the kitchen, Craddock said, that case could have held the opener, or even the parcel itself. Lang's looking guiltier by the minute. Perhaps, Miss Marple said, her voice thoughtful, but guilt is a heavy cloak, and many wear it to hide another's sins. We must tread carefully, Inspector. The day waned, the mansion settling into a restless quiet. Miss Marple felt the mystery tightening like a knot in her wool. Victor's shaky alibi, the silk glove, the black-inked envelope, was a stitch in a tapestry of deception. In St. Mary Mead, she had unravelled lies with a single question. Here, the questions multiplied, and the answers remained just out of reach. But the parcel, she knew, was the key message sent, not just to Sir Reginald, but to the killer who had turned it into a weapon. Chapter 8. The Forgotten Wiltshire Hargrove Mansion. For all its polished grandeur, seemed to Miss Jane Marple to be a house holding its breath, as if waiting for the next blow to fall. The afternoon light slanted through the drawing room's tall windows, gilding the silk wallpaper and and the delicate porcelain on the tea table, but the air was heavy with unspoken tensions. Miss Marple sat in her usual chair, her knitting bag at her side, the pale blue wool in her hands weaving a pattern, as intricate as the web of motives she was untangling. Her needles clicked softly, a steady rhythm against the distant hum of London traffic. As she pondered the latest threads, Victor Lang's shaky alibi, the silk glove, the black kinked envelope, and the whispered rumours of an affair that had stirred the Hargrove household like a storm in a teacup. Inspector Craddock stood by the mantel, his notebook open, his face a map of frustration and determination. "Miss Marple," he said, flipping through his notes, "we're getting somewhere, but it's a tangle. Lang's alibi is crumbling, and that glove fibre points to Lady Hargrove. But the parcel Hargrove, posting it himself, with his own blood still, doesn't add up. Why would he do it?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "People do strange things when they feel cornered, Inspector. Like old Mr. Simmons in St. Mary Mead, who hid his savings in a biscuit tin to catch his nephew. Perhaps Sir Reginald mailed that parcel to catch a thief or a traitor, but someone turned his trap against him." Craddock nodded, though his expression remained skeptical. "Maybe, but we need more than theories. I've called in Hargrove's solicitor, Mr. Pettigrew. He's coming to discuss the will. Edgar's claim about a divorce and disinheritance sounds like motive to me." Miss Marple's needles paused, just for a moment. "A will is a powerful thread, Inspector. It binds families or tears them apart, like Mrs. Green's inheritance in my village, which set her children squabbling like cats over cream. Let us see what Mr. Pettigrew reveals." Mr. Pettigrew arrived promptly, a small, precise man in his 60s, with a bald head and wire-rimmed glasses that gleamed like polished coins. He carried a leather briefcase, his movements brisk but cautious, as if he handled secrets as fragile as glass. They met in the library, where the scent of old books mingled with the faint tang of polish. Pettigrew settled at a table, opening his briefcase with a click that echoed in the quiet room. "Inspector Craddock, Miss Marple," he said, his voice dry as parchment. "I understand you're inquiring about Sir Reginald's will. A delicate matter, given the circumstances." Miss Marple smiled gently, her knitting needles clicking. "Delicate, indeed, Mr. Pettigrew. Wills are like gardens, they reveal what has been nurtured and what has been neglected. What can you tell us about Sir Reginald's intentions?" Pettigrew adjusted his glasses, extracting a document from his briefcase. "Sir Reginald consulted me a week ago about revising his will. He was concerned about the future of Hargrove Industries and his family's reliability. The new draft, which he signed 2 days before his death, left the bulk of his estate to his daughter, Amelia, including control of the company. His son, Edgar, was to receive a small annuity contingent on his leaving the family home and pursuing a trade. Lady Hargrove was to receive a modest settlement, but no share in the business." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "A modest settlement? That suggests a rift." Perhaps Pettigrew's lips thinned. Sir Reginald suspected his wife of infidelity. He mentioned a possible divorce, but decided against it, citing family reputation. Instead, he limited her inheritance to avoid any claim on the company. He also suspected embezzlement at Hargrove Industries, possibly by Mr. Thornton, and believed Amelia, with her fiancé's Victor Lang, could safeguard the firm. Craddock made a note, his pencil scratching loudly. "Did he mention the parcel or any threats?" Pettigrew shook his head. "No, but he was agitated. He said he was taking steps to secure his legacy, I assumed he meant the will, but he was cryptic. Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. Cryptic, indeed. Like Mr. Carter in St. Mary Mead, who left coded notes to trap a dishonest tenant. Did Sir Reginald share this will with anyone? Only his secretary, Miss Black, Pettigrew said. He dictated a letter to me in her presence, confirming the changes. She seemed distressed, but professional. Thank you, Mr. Pettigrew, Miss Marple said, her voice soft but probing. You've given us a clearer pattern. A will that shifts fortunes can stir desperate hearts. As Pettigrew left, Craddock turned to Miss Marple. Edgar's got motive cut out of the will, and Lady Hargrove, too, with that settlement. But why would Hargrove mail himself the murder weapon? Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile, perhaps to prove a point, Inspector, or to point a finger. We must speak with Edgar. Again he mentioned a letter about divorce, yet Pettigrew denies it. Edgar was found in his attic studio, surrounded by canvases splashed with vivid, chaotic colors. The air smelled of turpentine and resentment, and his dark eyes glared as they entered. Back to harass me, he said, tossing a paintbrush onto a table. I've told you everything. Miss Marple settled onto a stool, her knitting bag at her side. Not quite, Mr. Hargrove. You spoke of a letter about divorce, seen on your father's desk. Yet Mr. Pettigrew knows of no such plan. Where is this letter now? Edgar's face flushed, his hands clenching. I saw it, I swear. It was from Pettigrew, about cutting Mother out. It was there one day, gone the next. Maybe someone took it. Miss Marple's needles clicked. Or perhaps it never existed. Like the time young Tommy in my village claimed he saw a stolen watch, only to distract from his own mischief. Were you hoping to stir trouble, Mr. Hargrove? Edgar's eyes blazed. Trouble. Father was going to ruin me. That will it was a slap in the face. Amelia gets everything, and I'm left with scraps. Craddock stepped forward. Where were you when the parcel arrived, Edgar? Did you see it? In my studio, Edgar snapped. I didn't come down till dinner. Father was already rattled, wouldn't talk about it. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to a canvas, a dark, brooding portrait of Sir Reginald. His eyes painted with a mix of fear and defiance. Your work is very expressive, Mr. Hargrove. It holds anger, doesn't it? Like the paint we found on the letter opener. Edgar froze, his cigarette trembling. Paint? I don't know anything about that. I use oils, not theatrical nonsense. Of course, Miss Marple said mildly, but paint, like secrets, can leave traces. Thank you, Mr. Hargrove. As they descended from the attic, Craddock muttered, he's hiding something. That letter story sounds like a lie to throw us off. Perhaps, Miss Marple said, her voice thoughtful. But lies are like weeds, they grow to protect something deeper. I think we should speak with Miss Black again. Secretaries, you know, are like village postmistresses. They see the letters before they're sent. Lydia Black was in the office, sorting papers with a mechanical precision that belied the strain in her eyes. She rose as they entered, her plain face composed, but her hands betraying a slight tremor. Inspector, Miss Marple, she said, her voice low. I hope I can help. Miss Marple settled into a chair, her needles clicking. You've been most helpful, Miss Black. Mr. Pettigrew tells us Sir Reginald shared his will changes with you. You were distressed, he said. Why? Lydia's lips thinned. I was surprised. Sir Reginald was always fair, but cutting Edgar out seemed harsh. And Lady Hargrove, she's been kind to me. It felt wrong. Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her gaze was piercing. Kindness is a rare flower, Miss Black. Did Sir Reginald ever confide in you about his fears? Lydia hesitated, her fingers twisting. He said he feared for his life, that someone close was plotting against him. He didn't name names, but he mentioned insurance, said he was taking steps to protect himself. I thought he meant the will, but then that parcel came, and the blood on the opener, Miss Marple prompted. You saw it. Could it have been a cut, perhaps from shaving? Lydia nodded slowly. Possibly. He was clumsy sometimes. Nicked himself with a razor the day before he posted it. I saw him dab it with a cloth. Craddock made a note. And the paint. Any idea where that came from? Lydia shook her head. No, we don't keep theatrical paint here. Edgar's studio, perhaps, but he uses oils. Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. Thank you, Miss Black. You've given us a clearer stitch in the pattern. As they left the office, Craddock said that shaving cut fits the blood. Timeline 6 hours before death. Hargrove could have smeared it on the opener himself, mailed it as proof, but the paint, the glove, someone else got involved. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes distant. Someone who saw an opportunity, like Mrs. Price in St. Mary Mead, who used a lost glove to frame her rival, only for the truth to unravel. We must keep looking, Inspector. The day drew to a close, the mansion settling into a heavy silence. Miss Marple felt the mystery tightening like a knot in her wool. The will, the letter, the blood-stained opener, each was a thread in a tapestry of betrayal. In St. Mary Mead, she had unravelled secrets with a single question. Here, the questions multiplied, but the answers were drawing closer, like shadows at dusk. Chapter 9. The Night Visitor. The Hargrove mansion seemed to Miss Jane Marple to be a house caught in a web of its own making. Each room, a thread trembling with secrets yet to be unravelled. The morning was grey, with a damp chill seeping through the windows, as if London itself mourned Sir Reginald Hargrove's untimely end. Miss Marple sat in the drawing-room, her knitting bag at her side, the pale blue wool in her hands, weaving a pattern as delicate as the puzzle she was piecing together. Her needles clicked softly, a steady counterpoint to the distant clatter of the household staff preparing for the day. The revelations of the forgotten will, the silk glove, and Victor Lang's faltering alibi had tightened the mystery, but the visit to Dorking lingered in her mind like a half-remembered tune. A night visitor, an argument, and a parcel mailed with cryptic intent. Inspector Craddock joined her, his face etched with the strain of chasing leads that seemed to twist away like smoke. He carried a fresh report from Scotland Yard, his notebook bristling with notes. Miss Marple, he said, settling into a chair, we've got a breakthrough on the Dorking visitor. Mrs. Finch, the neighbour, picked out a photograph. Victor Lang, no question. She's certain he was the man arguing with Hargrove that night. And his secretaries admitted he took a train to Dorking that afternoon, though he still claims it was business. Miss Marple's needles paused, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles. Business that turned to shouting, Inspector, like Mr. Carter in St. Mary Mead, who quarrelled with his nephew over money, only to find the boy had darker plans. What does Mr. Lang say about this visit? Craddock flipped through his notebook. He admits going to Willow Cottage, says it was to discuss the merger. Hargrove accused him of pushing too hard, wanting control of the company. Lang claims he left after an hour, caught the last train back. But Mrs. Finch says he was there longer, till nearly midnight. Miss Marple nodded, her needles resuming their rhythm. Midnight is a late hour for business, especially in a village. And the parcel posted the next day, with Hargrove's blood and that curious paint. I wonder if Mr. Lang saw it being prepared. Craddock frowned. You think he tampered with it? Not tampered, perhaps, Miss Marple said, her voice soft but certain. But he may have seen an opportunity, like Mrs. Green's gardener in my village, who used a master's tools to dig his own trap. We must speak with Mr. Lang again, but first, let us revisit Mrs. Finch's account. They telephoned Dorking, and Mrs. Finch, ever eager to share village gossip, was happy to elaborate. Oh yes, Miss Marple, she said, her voice crackling over the line. It was that banker chap, tall and polished, like a city gent. He arrived by taxi, round 7, and I heard him and Sir Reginald at it. Hammer and tongs. You'll ruin us all, Sir Reginald shouted, and the other one said, You're blind, Reggie, family, I thought, by the tone. He left in a huff, near midnight, caught the last train. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, and Sir Reginald how was he after? Pacing the garden, muttering, Mrs. Finch said, I saw him through my window, looking like a man with the devil on his heels. Next morning, he went to the post office, clutching that parcel. Thank you, Mrs. Finch, Miss Marple said. You've a sharp eye, like our postmistress in St. Mary Mead. Hanging up, Miss Marple turned to Craddock. Victor Lang, calling Sir Reginald Reggie, arguing late into the night, and the parcel posted the next day, with blood and paint. The threads are weaving tighter, Inspector. Craddock nodded, his expression grim. Lang's got no alibi for after the Savoy, and now this Dorking trip looks suspicious. I've asked him to come in this afternoon, but what's his motive? The merger was his ticket to wealth. Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. Wealth is a strong motive, but so is fear. Perhaps Sir Reginald saw something in Mr. Lang that made him wary. We must be gentle. Inspector people reveal most when they think they're safe. Victor Lang arrived at the mansion promptly, his dark coat immaculate, but his eyes shadowed with unease. He stood in the drawing room, his gold watch chain glinting as he fidgeted, his polished air fraying at the edges. Inspector, Miss Marple, he said, his voice smooth but strained. I've told you everything. This constant questioning is harassment. Miss Marple smiled gently, her knitting needles clicking. We seek only truth, Mr. Lang. You visited Sir Reginald in Dorking, we know. A heated argument, late into the night. What was it about? Victor's jaw tightened. The merger, as I said. Reginald thought I was moving too fast, wanted more control for himself. I told him it was for the company's good, but he wouldn't listen. Called me greedy me, who's marrying his daughter. Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her gaze was piercing. Greedy is a harsh word. Did he mention the parcel? Victor hesitated, his fingers twitching on his watch chain. He had it on his desk, wrapped but not sealed. Said it was a business matter, a gag to shake things up. I didn't ask more, he was in a foul mood. Craddock leaned forward, his pencil poised. And you left when? Be precise. 11, maybe a bit later, Victor said. Caught the last train at 11:45. You can check the station. Miss Marple's needles clicked. And this gag, did he say who it was for? No, Victor said quickly. He was cryptic, muttering about insurance. I thought he meant the merger. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes noting the slight sheen of sweat on his brow. Insurance, indeed. Like Mr. Simmons in my village, who sent himself a letter to trap a thief, only to find the thief had read it first. "Thank you, Mr. Lang." As Victor left, Craddock muttered, "He's nervous. That gag story Hargrove mailing a bloody opener as a joke. It's thin, very thin." Miss Marple agreed, but people cling to thin lies when the truth is heavy. "I think we should look at the study again, Inspector. That desk holds more than papers." They returned to the study, where the air still carried the faint tang of cigar smoke and tragedy. Miss Marple examined the desk, her gloved fingers tracing the edges of the drawers. The sealing wax box was there, its red sticks gleaming, one showing signs of recent use. She opened another drawer, finding a small notebook, its pages filled with Hargrove's bold script. One entry, dated the day before the Dorking visit, read, "VL to eager. Suspect motives. Must test loyalty." "Look here," Miss Marple said, showing it to Craddock. Sir Reginald doubted Victor. Perhaps the parcel was a test, not a gag. Craddock's eyes narrowed. A test that got him killed. But how did the blood and paint get on the opener? Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile. "Someone saw the parcel and used it, Inspector. Like Mrs. Price's maid, who turned a lost key into a theft. We need to know who had access to that desk after Victor's visit." They summoned Parsons, the butler, who stood ramrod straight, his face impassive. "Parsons," Miss Marple said, her voice gentle, "you locked up the house the night of the murder. Did anyone enter the study after Mr. Lang returned to London?" Parsons hesitated, his eyes flickering. "No, ma'am. The study was bolted, as always, but the day before, when Sir Reginald was in Dorking, I saw Miss Black in here, looking at the desk. She said she was fetching papers." Craddock made a note. "Lydia Black, again. She's everywhere in this case." Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking. "Like a village postmistress, always at the heart of things. We must speak with her, but carefully. She's loyal, and loyalty can blind." Lydia Black was found in the office, sorting correspondence with her usual precision. Her plain face was composed, but her eyes held a guarded wariness. "Miss Black," Miss Marple began, settling into a chair, "you were in the study the day before Sir Reginald's death, looking at his desk. What were you seeking?" Lydia's hand stilled, her voice low. "Papers for the merger. Sir Reginald asked me to organize them. I didn't touch anything else." Miss Marple's eyes softened. "And the parcel, did you see it before it was posted?" Lydia shook her head. "No, he prepared it himself in Dorking, but I saw the opener on his desk that morning, before he left for the cottage. It was clean then." Craddock leaned forward. "Clean, you're sure?" "Yes," Lydia said, her voice firm. "No blood, no paint. I'd have noticed." Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. "Thank you, Miss Black. You've given us a clearer stitch in the pattern." As they left, Craddock said, "The opener was clean before Dorking, but mailed with blood and paint. Someone doctored it after Victor's visit." "Indeed," Miss Marple said, her voice thoughtful. "A visitor by night, a parcel by day. The threads are tightening, Inspector, but the knot is still hidden. Like the time in St. Mary Mead when Mrs. Green's letter was opened before it reached her, revealing a betrayal no one expected." The day waned, the mansion settling into a heavy silence. Miss Marple felt the mystery coiling tighter, like a stitch pulled taut. Victor's argument, the clean opener, the doctored parcelage, was a thread in a tapestry of deceit. In St. Mary Mead, She had unravelled lies with a single glance. Here, the glances were guarded, but the truth was drawing closer, like a shadow in the dusk. Chapter 10. The red herring unveiled the Hargrove mansion, with its grand facade and hushed corridors, seemed to Miss Jane Marple to be a stage where every player hid behind a mask, their true faces glimpsed only in fleeting shadows. The late morning light filtered through the drawing room's tall windows, casting a soft glow on the silk wallpaper, but the warmth did little to ease the chill of suspicion that permeated the air. Miss Marple sat in her accustomed chair, her knitting bag at her side, the pale blue wool in her hands, weaving a pattern as intricate as the mystery unfolding before her. Her needles clicked softly, a steady rhythm against the distant murmur of the household staff. As she pondered the latest threads, Victor Lang's midnight visit to Dorking, the clean letter opener turned deadly, and the silk glove that pointed to a woman's hand in the crime. Inspector Craddock stood by the mantel, his notebook open, his face a map of determination tinged with exasperation. "Miss Marple," he said, flipping through his notes, "we're closing in, but it's a devil of a puzzle. Lang's visit to Dorking, the glove fibre matching Lady Hargrove's, and now Lydia Black saying the opener was clean before it was mailed. It's like chasing a shadow that keeps changing shape." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "Shadows, Inspector, are cast by something solid, like the time in St. Mary Mead when Mrs. Price's stolen brooch led us to her maid, who'd hidden it in plain sight. We must look at what's solid here, parcel, the blood, the paint." Someone turned Sir Reginald's own trap against him. Craddock nodded, his pencil tapping the notebook. Thornton's alibi for Manchester Holdsey was there when Hargrove died, but his affair with Lady Hargrove gives him motive, and Lang's story about the gag parcel is flimsy. "I've got men checking his flat for that briefcase." The waiter saw. Miss Marple's needles paused, just for a moment. A briefcase, a glove, a note in black ink. Each is a thread, but some threads are meant to distract. "I think we should speak with Elsie again, Inspector. Servants, you know, are like the sparrows in my garden, they see the smallest details." Elsie was summoned from the kitchen, her plain face pale and her hands twisting in her apron as she stood before them. The drawing room's elegance seemed to shrink her, but Miss Marple's gentle smile steadied her. "Elsie, dear," she began, her voice as soothing as a fireside chat, "you've been a great help. Tell me, did Sir Reginald ever mention sending a parcel as a test?" Elsie's eyes widened, her voice barely above a whisper. "A test, ma'am? Yes, he did, the day before. He went to Dorking. I was dusting the study, and he was wrapping a parcel, said it was a decoy. To see who bites. I thought he meant business, but he looked sly, like he was playing a game." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. A decoy. How very intriguing. And this parcel was it, the one with the letter opener? Elsie shook her head. "I don't know, ma'am. It was wrapped in brown paper, like the one that came later. But he sent me out before he finished, said it was private." Craddock leaned forward, his pencil poised. "Did anyone else see him with it? Miss Black, perhaps?" "No, sir," Elsie said. "Miss Black was at the office that day, but Mr. Lang was here earlier. I saw him in the hall, talking to Sir Reginald. They went quiet when I passed." Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her gaze was piercing. "Thank you, Elsie. You're a treasure, like our maid in St. Mary Mead, who always knew when the vicar's wife was hiding her best teapot." As Elsie retreated, Craddock turned to Miss Marple. "A decoy parcel. Hargrove was setting a trap. But for whom? And how did it end up with his blood and that paint? Miss Marple nodded, her needles moving steadily. A trap that became a weapon. Like Mr. Carter's coded notes in my village, meant to catch a thief, but used to frame him. Instead, we must look at the opener itself, Inspector. Was it truly the one from the desk? Craddock's telephone rang, and he stepped aside to answer it. When he returned, his face was grim. The lab's got something new. The letter opener in Hargrove's. Chest-its, a duplicate. Same crest, same design, but the metal's slightly different, a newer alloy. The original's still missing. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. A duplicate. How very clever. Someone replaced the opener in the parcel with another, smeared with blood and paint. The original may still be in this house. They returned to the study, where the air held the faint tang of cigar smoke and tragedy. Miss Marple examined the desk, her gloved fingers tracing the edges of the drawers. The ceiling wax box was there, its red sticks gleaming, one showing signs of recent use. She opened another drawer, finding a small velvet case, empty but shaped to hold a letter opener. "Look here," she said, holding it up. "The original was kept here, but it's gone." Craddock frowned. So someone took the real opener, mailed a duplicate with blood and paint, and used it to kill him. But who had access? Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile. Access, Inspector, is not just about keys. It's about opportunity. Like Mrs. Green's gardener, who borrowed her tools to dig his own trap. We must speak with Thornton. Again, his affair with Lady Hargrove makes him a shadow in this pattern. Harold Thornton was summoned to the mansion, arriving with a bluster that barely masked his unease. His florid face was flushed, and his moustache bristled as he stood. In the drawing room, "Inspector, this is getting absurd," he said, his voice booming. "I was in Manchester when Hargrove died. My alibi's solid." Miss Marple settled into a chair, her knitting needles clicking. "Indeed, Mr. Thornton. But motives linger, even across cities. Your friendship with Lady Hargrove did, sir. Reginald confront you about it?" Thornton's face reddened, his hands clenching. He suspected, yes. "Cornered me a week ago. Said he'd ruin me if it continued. I told him it was over, had been for months. I was at his house the day before he went to Dorking to clear the air. He was alive when I left." Craddock's eyes narrowed. "And the parcel, did you see it?" "No," Thornton said quickly. "He was writing letters, muttering about insurance. I didn't pry." Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. Insurance, again. A word that keeps circling, like a moth round a flame. "Thank you, Mr. Thornton." As Thornton left, Craddock muttered, "He's nervous, but his alibi holds. And that duplicate opener, someone went to great lengths to stage this." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes distant. A stage, indeed. The blood, the paint, the gloval props in a performance. But the decoy parcel suggests Sir Reginald was the first actor setting the scene. Someone else wrote the final act. They summoned Lady Hargrove, who entered with her usual grace, her black dress a stark contrast to her pale face. Her eyes were shadowed, but her composure held, like a vase cracked but not yet broken. "Inspector, Miss Marple," she said, settling onto a chaise longue. "I hope this ends soon. The funeral is tomorrow, and I can't bear the whispers." Miss Marple's voice was gentle but probing. "Whispers are hard to silence, Lady Hargrove. Your glove, for instance, silk, expensive, found in the wax on the opener. Can you explain that?" Lady Hargrove's hands froze on her handkerchief. My glove. I lose them all the time. I might have left one in the study, but I didn't. Touch that parcel. Miss Marple's needles clicked. Of course, but secrets, like gloves, are easily picked up by others. Did you know of Sir Reginald's decoy parcel? Lady Hargrove's eyes widened. Decoy? No, he never said. He was secretive, always locking things away. Craddock made a note. And your friendship with Thornton, was it truly over? Yes, she said, her voice trembling. Reginald believed me. He was angry, but he forgave me. Miss Marple. Eyes softened. Forgiveness is a fragile thread, Lady Hargrove. Thank you. As Lady Hargrove left, Craddock turned to Miss Marple. The glove points to her, but the duplicate opener suggests planning. Lang, Thornton, or someone else who's the red herring here. Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. A red herring is only effective if you chase it, Inspector. Like the time in St. Mary Mead when Mrs. Carter's lost brooch led us astray, only to reveal her son's theft. The parcel was Sir Reginald's herring, but someone turned it into a hook. The day drew to a close, the mansion settling into a heavy silence. Miss Marple felt the mystery tightening, like a knot in her wall. The decoy parcel, the duplicate opener, the silk glove itch, was a thread in a tapestry of deception. Mary Mead, she had unraveled lies with a single glance. Here, the glances were guarded, but the truth was drawing closer, like a shadow at dusk. Chapter 11. The psychological trap. The Hargrove mansion, with its imposing elegance and shadowed corners, seemed to Miss Jane Marple to be a chessboard where every move concealed a deeper strategy. The afternoon light filtered through the drawing rooms, tall windows, casting a muted glow on the silk wallpaper, but the air was thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Miss Marple sat in her usual chair, her knitting bag at her side, the pale blue wool in her hands weaving a pattern as intricate as the web of deceit she was unraveling. Her needles clicked softly, a steady rhythm against the faint hum of the city beyond. As she pondered the latest threads, the decoy parcel, the duplicate letter opener, and the silk glove that pointed to a woman's hand, perhaps deliberately placed, the mystery was tightening, and Miss Marple felt it was time to set a trap of her own, not with evidence, but with the subtle art of human nature. Inspector Craddock stood by the mantel, his notebook open, his face a mixture of determination and fatigue. Miss Marple, he said, flipping through his notes, we've got a tangle of clues, but they're pointing everywhere and nowhere. The duplicate opener, the theatrical paint, the glove fiber, someone's playing a clever game, and Hargrove's decoy parcel suggests he was onto them, but who? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. Games, Inspector, are won by understanding the players. Like the time in St. Mary Mead when Mrs. Green set a trap for her thieving gardener by leaving out a marked coin. We must do something similar, stir the pot, and see who flinches. I think it's time to gather the household and lay a little bait. Craddock raised an eyebrow, but the hint of a smile played on his lips. You've got something up your sleeve, haven't you? What's the plan? Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. People reveal themselves when they feel safe or threatened. Let us bring them together and suggest we know more than we do. The guilty will betray themselves, like a dropped stitch in a shawl. Craddock nodded, his skepticism tempered by trust in her instincts. I'll arrange it. The family, Lydia Black, Thornton, everyone in the drawing room this evening. What do you want me to say? Nothing too precise, Miss Marple said, her voice soft but certain. Hint that that the parcel was Sir Reginald's trap, and that the paint on the opener is a key. Watch their faces, Inspector. Eyes and hands tell more than words. The household was summoned for 6 o'clock, and by evening, the drawing room was a stage set for revelation. Lady Evelyn Hargrove sat on a chaise longue, her black dress impeccable, her lace handkerchief fluttering like a nervous bird. Edgar lounged in a corner, his paint-stained fingers fidgeting with a cigarette, his eyes dark with resentment. Amelia stood by the window, her posture rigid, her tailored suit a shield against the tension. Victor Lang hovered near her, his polished air fraying, his gold watch chain glinting as he shifted uneasily. Lydia Black sat quietly, her plain face composed but her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Harold Thornton, summoned from the office, stood with his arms crossed, his moustache bristling with impatience. Parsons and Elsie lingered by the door, their presence a reminder of the household's unseen eyes. Craddock took the center of the room, his voice calm but authoritative. "Thank you for coming," he said, his notebook tucked away. "We're close to solving Sir Reginald's murder, and we believe the parcel he mailed himself was the key. It was a decoy, a trap to expose a traitor. The blood on the opener was his own, from a shaving cut, applied hours before his death. But the theatrical paint that was the killer's touch, a clue they couldn't resist adding." Miss Marple watched the room, her needles clicking softly, her eyes darting from face to face. Lady Evelyn's handkerchief froze, her eyes narrowing. Edgar's cigarette trembled, his gaze dropping to the floor. Amelia's lips parted, her hand gripping Victor's arm. Victor's face paled, his fingers twitching on his watch chain. Lydia Black sat still, but her knuckles whitened. Thornton's mustache twitched, his eyes flicking to Lady Evelyn. "The paint," Miss Marple said, her voice gentle but carrying, "is most revealing. Theatrical, the kind used for dramatic effect. We found it on the duplicate opener, the one used to kill Sir Reginald, not the original from his desk. Someone thought to make the murder a performance, but they left a trace." Edgar's head snapped up, his voice sharp. "Paint, you think I did it? My oils are nothing like that stage. Nonsense." Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her gaze was piercing. "No one accused you, Mr. Hargrove. But you did use theatrical paint once, didn't you? For a charity play last year, in the village hall. I saw the poster in your studio." Edgar's face flushed, his cigarette dropping ash. "That was ages ago. I haven't touched it since." Amelia stepped forward, her voice fierce. "This is absurd. Father trusted Victor. Why would he stage anything?" Victor's hand tightened on her arm, his voice low. "Amelia, let them talk. They've got nothing." Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. "Oh, but we have something, Mr. Lang. The parcel was Sir Reginald's trap, but someone turned it against him. The blood was his, yes, but the paint was added later. After your visit to Dorking, you saw the parcel, didn't you? On his desk, unsealed." Victor's eyes widened, but he recovered quickly. "I told you it was a gag. He said so himself." Lady Hargrove's handkerchief fluttered. Reginald was always playing games. He loved to test people, his family, his partners. Thornton snorted. "Test us." He was paranoid, thought we were all out to get him. Lydia Black spoke for the first time, her voice low but clear. "He was afraid. He told me he feared betrayal, that the parcel was his insurance. I didn't understand." Then Miss Marple's eyes flicked to Lydia, noting the slight tremor in her hands. "Insurance, Miss Black, is a word we keep hearing. like Mrs. Carter in St. Mary Mead, who left a marked coin to catch a thief, only to find it in her own daughter's purse. The paint, I think, was meant to point us to Mr. Hargrove, but it was a red herring, wasn't it? The room fell silent, the tension thick as fog. Edgar's cigarette dropped to the floor, his face pale. "You're saying someone framed me?" "Not framed, perhaps," Miss Marple said gently, "but distracted us. The real opener is still missing, and the duplicate was a clever touch. Someone had access to Sir Reginald's desk, his stationery, his secrets." Craddock stepped forward, his voice firm. "We're testing every glove in this house, and we're searching for that original opener. If anyone knows anything, now's the time to speak." The silence stretched, broken only by the click of Miss Marple's needles. Then Amelia spoke, her voice trembling. "Victor, tell them everything. You were in Dorking. You argued with father. What happened?" Victor's face tightened, his eyes darting to the door. "I've told you, it was about the merger. He didn't trust me, thought I was after his company. I left, that's all." Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her voice was steady. "And yet, Mr. Lang, you carried a briefcase that night at the Savoy. What was in it? The opener, perhaps, or the paint?" Victor's hand froze on his watch chain. "You're fishing, Miss Marple. I had papers, that's all." The room held its breath, but no one spoke further. Craddock dismissed them, his eyes scanning each face as they left. Lady Hargrove's handkerchief was crumpled. Edgar's cigarette smouldered on the rug. Amelia clung to Victor's arm. Thornton stormed out, and Lydia Black slipped away silently. As the room emptied, Craddock turned to Miss Marple. "You rattled them, but no one broke. What now?" Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. "They're rattled because they're afraid, Inspector. Like the time in St. Mary Mead when Mrs. Price's maid confessed after we hinted we knew her secret. Someone in this room knows the truth, and they'll slip soon." Craddock nodded, his expression grim. "We'll keep digging, Searchlangs. Flat, test the gloves. But that paint, it's got to be Edgar's, even if he denies it." "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, her voice thoughtful, "but red herrings are slippery things. The paint was meant to point us to him, but the glove points elsewhere. We must keep watching, Inspector." The evening settled over the mansion, the silence heavy with unspoken fears. Miss Marple felt the mystery tightening, like a knot in her wall. The decoy parcel, the duplicate opener, the theatrical paintage, was a thread in a tapestry of deception. In St. Mary Mead, she had unravelled lies with a single word. Here, the words were many, but the truth was drawing closer, like a shadow in the twilight. Chapter 12. The final thread, the Hargrove mansion, with its grand columns and shadowed halls, seemed to Miss Jane Marple to be a house on the edge of revelation, its secrets poised to unravel like a poorly knitted scarf. The morning was crisp, with a thin veil of fog cloaking Kensington Gardens, muting the city's clamour to a distant murmur. Miss Marple sat in the drawing-room, her knitting bag at her side, the pale blue wool in her hands weaving a pattern as intricate as the mystery she was close to solving. Her needles clicked softly, a steady rhythm against the ticking of the gilt clock. As she reflected on the psychological trap she had set the previous evening, the household had been rattled, eyes had flickered, hands had trembled, but no one had confessed. Yet Miss Marple knew that truth, like a dropped stitch, would soon betray itself. Inspector Craddock joined her, his face lined with the strain of a case that seemed to twist at every turn. He carried a fresh report from Scotland. "Yeah," his notebook bristling with notes. "Miss Marple," he said, settling into a chair, "your little performance last night stirred things up. We searched Victor Lang's flat this morning, found a tin of theatrical paint, the same brand as on the opener. No original letter opener, though, and no gloves. But it's enough to bring him in for questioning." Miss Marple's needles paused, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles. Theatrical paint, Inspector. How very telling. Like the time in St. Mary Mead when young Tommy painted his hands to fake an injury, only to leave smudges on the vicar's desk. But paint alone is not proof. We must be sure it's not another red herring. Craddock nodded, his pencil tapping the notebook. Lang's alibi for after the Savoy is still shaky, and his Dorking visit puts him at the scene of the parcels. Preparation. But the glove fibre Lady Hargrove silk points to her, and Lydia Black's access to the desk makes her a dark horse. Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile. Dark horses often surprise, Inspector. But let us focus on Mr. Lang first. His paint, his visit, his briefcase, too many threads lead to him. I think it's time we pressed him, gently but firmly. Victor Lang was brought to the mansion. Under police escort, his polished air now frayed, his dark coat slightly rumpled. He stood in the drawing room, his gold watch chain glinting as his fingers fidgeted, his eyes darting between Craddock and Miss Marple. "This is outrageous," he said, his voice tight. "I've cooperated fully. You've nothing on me." Miss Marple settled into her chair, her knitting needles clicking. "Cooperation is admirable, Mr. Lang, but truth is better. We found theatrical paint in your flat, the same as on the duplicate opener that killed Sir Reginald, and you were in Dorking, arguing with him the night before he mailed his decoy parcel. What was in your briefcase that night at the Savoy?" Victor's face paled, but he held his ground. "Papers, as I said. Business documents. The paint, I bought it for a charity play last year, same as Edgar. It's coincidence, nothing more." Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her gaze was piercing. "Coincidences are rare in murder, Mr. Lang. Like Mrs. Green's gardener in St. Mary Mead, who claimed a stolen spade was coincidence when it was found in his shed. You saw the parcel in Dorking, didn't you? Unsealed on Sir Reginald's desk." Victor's jaw tightened. "I told you," he called it a gag. "I didn't touch it." Craddock leaned forward, his voice firm. "But you left the Savoy early, carrying a briefcase, and you had no alibi for those hours. Did you come here, Victor? Did you take the original opener and replace it with a duplicate?" Victor's hands clenched, his voice rising. "No, I went home, I swear. I had nothing to do with his death." Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily, and yet someone did. Someone took the original opener, smeared a duplicate with blood and paint, and turned Sir Reginald's trap into murder. You argued with him about the merger, called him Reggie, a family term. Were you afraid he'd cut you out, Mr. Lang? Victor's eyes flickered, but he shook his head. He trusted me. I was marrying Amelia, securing the company. Why would I kill him? Miss Marple's voice was gentle but unyielding. Because trust can turn to suspicion, Mr. Lang. Sir Reginald wrote in his notebook that you were too eager. Perhaps he saw ambition where you saw opportunity. Victor turned away, his shoulders tense, but he said nothing more. As he was escorted out, Craddock muttered, "He's hiding something, but he's not cracking. We need more." Miss Marple nodded, her needles moving steadily. "We will have it, Inspector. Like Mrs. Carter's stolen brooch, the truth is hidden in plain sight." I think we should speak with Miss Black again. Her loyalty to Sir Reginald runs deep, and loyalty can blind or bind. Lydia Black was found in the office, sorting papers with her usual precision, though her hands trembled slightly. Her plain face was composed, but her eyes held a quiet intensity, like a still pond with unseen currents. Miss Black, Miss Marple began, settling into a chair. You've been a pillar in this house. Sir Reginald relied on you, didn't he? For more than just letters. Lydia's lips thinned, her voice low. He trusted me with his work, yes. I kept his secrets, his plans. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, and his fears, he spoke. Of betrayal, of insurance. The parcel was his decoy, meant to trap a traitor. Did he tell you who he suspected? Lydia hesitated, her fingers twisting. He mentioned Mr. Lang, said he was pushing the merger too fast, wanted control. Sir Reginald thought he might be skimming funds, with Mr. Thornton's help. He said the parcel would show their true colours. Craddock's eyes narrowed. And you didn't think to tell us this before. Lydia's cheeks flushed. I didn't want to believe it. Mr. Lang seemed devoted to Miss Amelia, and Mr. Thornton, Sir Reginald trusted him once. Miss Marple's eyes softened. Loyalty is a heavy chain, Miss Black. Did you ever see the original letter opener after it left the desk? Lydia shook her head. No, it was there the morning he went to Dorking, clean. I never saw it again. Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking. Thank you, Miss Black. You've given us a clearer stitch in the pattern. As they left the office, Craddock said, Lang and Thornton, working together. It fits Thornton's affair, Lang's ambition, but the glove lady Hargrove's throws a wrench in it. Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile. The glove is a distraction, Inspector. Like Mrs. Price's lost ring, left to point to her rival, but planted by another. I think it's time we set another trap. That evening, Craddock gathered the household again, this time in the study, where the air still held the faint tang of cigar smoke and tragedy. Miss Marple stood by the desk, her knitting bag at her feet, her voice calm but carrying. We're very close to the truth, she said, her eyes sweeping the room. Lady Hargrove sat stiffly, her handkerchief crumpled. Edgar slouched, his cigarette unlit. Amelia clung to Victor's arm, her face pale. Thornton stood by the door, his mustache bristling. Lydia Black hovered near the bookshelves, her eyes downcast. The parcel, Miss Marple continued, was Sir Reginald's decoy meant to expose a betrayer, but someone turned it into a murder weapon. The blood was his, from a shaving cut. The paint was theatrical, meant to point to Mr. Hargrove. The glove fibre, from Lady Hargrove's silk, was meant to mislead. But the duplicate opener that was the killer's true mistake. She paused, her eyes locking on each face in turn. We found the original opener, hidden in this very room, in a place only someone close to Sir Reginald would know. It was a lie, a carefully placed bait, but the effect was immediate. Victor's hand tightened on Amelia's arm, his face draining of colour. Lady Hargrove's handkerchief fell to the floor. Lydia Black gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Where? Edgar demanded, his voice sharp. You're bluffing. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. Am I, Mr. Hargrove? The original opener was never mailed. It was replaced with a duplicate, smeared with paint and blood, to stage a murder. Only someone with access to this desk-hand Sir Reginald's trust could have done it. Lydia Black stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. It was me, she said, her eyes filling with tears. I killed him. He suspected Mr. Lang and Mr. Thornton thought they were stealing. I loved him, you see, not as a secretary, but as a woman. He didn't return it, but he trusted me. When he sent the parcel, I saw my chance. I took the original opener, Mead, a duplicate, smeared it with paint from the charity play supplies in the attic. I used his blood from a cloth he'd discarded, added the glove fibre to point to Lady Hargrove. I stabbed him that night. Through the window latchet was loose, easy to open and close. The room froze, the silence broken only by Amelia's sob. Craddock stepped forward, his voice gentle. "Miss Black, you're under arrest." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. Love, Miss Black, is the most dangerous thread of all. Like Mrs. Carter's daughter in St. Mary Mead, who stole to keep a man's affection, only to lose everything. As Lydia was led away, the mansion seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. Miss Marple felt the mystery unravel, like a finished shawl falling from her needles. The decoy parcel, the duplicate opener, the misplaced glove threads in a tapestry of desperate love. In St. Mary Mead, she had unraveled lies with a glance. Here, it had taken a trap, but the truth had finally emerged, stark and sorrowful in the morning light. Chapter 13. The Aftermath, the Hargrove Mansion. Once a fortress of secrets, seemed to Miss Jane Marple to have exhaled its last hidden breath. Its grand halls, now heavy with the weight of truth revealed. The morning after Lydia Black's confession was bright with sunlight streaming through the drawing room's tall windows, gilding the silk wallpaper and casting long shadows that no longer hid deceit. Miss Marple sat in her familiar chair, her knitting bag at her side, the pale blue wool in her hands weaving the final rows of a pattern as intricate as the mystery she had unraveled. Her needles clicked softly, a soothing rhythm against the distant sounds of the household stirring, as she reflected on the tangled threads of love, betrayal, and a decoy parcel that had led to Sir Reginald Hargrove's murder. Inspector joined her, his face a mixture of relief and weariness, his notebook finally closed. He settled into a chair, a cup of tea in hand, the steam curling like the last wisps of the case. "Miss Marple," he said, his voice tinged with admiration, "you've done it again. Lydia Black's confession ties it all together, the duplicate opener, the paint, the glove fibre. I'd never have thought to set that trap about the original opener. How did you know she'd break?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "People, Inspector, are like my knitting pool. The right thread, and the whole pattern unravels. Lydia's love for Sir Reginald was her weakness, just as Mrs. Carter's daughter in St. Mary Mead betrayed herself for a man's affection. I saw it in her hands, her eyes. She carried her guilt like a heavy shawl." Craddock nodded, sipping his tea. "She's at the station now, giving a full statement. Says she acted alone, used the loose window latch to get into the study that night. The blood from Hargrove's shaving cut, the paint from the attic, the glove fibre from Lady Hargrove's collection. It was all her, staged to point to Edgar and Lady Hargrove. But why the parcel? Why not just stab him and be done with it?" Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. The parcel was Sir Reginald's own doing, a decoy to test his suspected traitors, Victor Lang and Harold Thornton. Lydia saw it as her chance, not just to kill, but to control the narrative. She turned his trap into her weapon, adding the paint and glove to muddy the waters. Like Mr. Simmons in my village, who left a marked coin to catch a thief, only to have it used against him. Craddock leaned back, his expression thoughtful, and Victor Lang, his Dorking visit, the paint in his flat. Were we wrong about him? Not wrong, but misled, Miss Marple said, her voice soft but certain. Mr. Lang's ambition made him a perfect decoy for Lydia's scheme. The paint in his flat was from the same charity play supplies she had access to them in the attic. His argument with Sir Reginald gave her a motive to pin on him. But he was no killer, just a man with secrets, like so many. The drawing-room door opened, and Lady Evelyn Hargrove entered, her black dress as elegant as ever, but her face drawn with a grief that now seemed genuine. Her auburn hair was pinned tightly, and her eyes, though red-rimmed, held a quiet resolve. "Miss Marple, Inspector," she said, settling onto a chaise longue. "I've just heard about Lydia. I can't believe it. She was so loyal, so quiet. How could she do this?" Miss Marple's needles paused, her eyes gentle but probing. "Love, Lady Hargrove, is a powerful force. It can bind or break a heart. Lydia loved your husband in her way, and when he didn't return it, her love turned to desperation. Your glove, left carelessly, was her tool to shift blame." Lady Evelyn's hands trembled, her handkerchief twisting. "I should have seen it. Reginald was distant, but I never thought. And my affair with Thornton I broke his trust, didn't I?" Miss Marple's voice was kind. "Trust is fragile, my dear, but so is human nature. Like Mrs. Green in St. Mary Mead, whose flirtation caused a rift, but forgiveness healed it. You'll carry on, as families do." Lady Evelyn nodded, her eyes glistening, and excused herself, leaving the room with a softer step. Amelia Hargrove appeared next, her tailored suit crisp but her face pale, her eyes shadowed with betrayal. She stood by the window, her posture rigid, as if bracing against a storm. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice low, "Victor told me everything, his argument with father, his fears about the merger. He's not guilty, is he?" Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. "No, my dear. Mr. Lang was ambitious, perhaps too eager, but not a murderer. Lydia used his presence in Dorking to weave her web. You must decide if his ambition aligns with your heart." Amelia's lips trembled, but she nodded. "I will. Thank you for finding the truth." As Amelia left, Edgar slouched in, his paint-stained hands shoved into his pockets, his dark eyes wary but relieved. "So, it was Lydia," he said, lighting a cigarette. "I thought you'd pin it on me, with that paint nonsense." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "The paint was a clever touch. Mr. Hargrove meant to point to you. But your anger was too open, too raw, to be a killer's, like young Tommy in my village, who shouted his grievances but never acted on them. You'll find your way, I think, without your father's shadow." Edgar snorted but said nothing, exhaling smoke as he left. Craddock turned to Miss Marple, his expression one of quiet awe. "You saw through it, all the red herrings, the lies. Scotland Yard could use you full-time." Miss Marple's needles clicked, her smile serene. "Oh no, Inspector. My place is in St. Mary Mead, with my roses and my neighbours, but human. Nature is the same everywhere, village or city. It betrays itself in the end." As they prepared to leave, Craddock received a call from the station. "Lydia's confessed fully," he said, hanging up. "She planned it after Hargrove rejected. Her used the parcel to stage a murder that looked like a conspiracy. The window latch was loose. For years she knew it from cleaning the study." Miss Marple nodded, her needles stilling as she tied off her knitting. A loose latch, a desperate heart. The smallest things unravel the largest plans. Like Mrs. Carter's daughter, who thought love justified theft, only to lose it all. The mansion settled into a new quiet, its secrets laid bare. Miss Marple gathered her knitting bag, ready to return to St. Mary Mead, where the roses would be blooming, and the village gossip would be less deadly but no less revealing. The parcel, the opener, the gloval threads in a tapestry now complete. In her village, she had unravelled lies with a glance. Here, in the heart of London, it had taken a trap, but the truth had emerged, stark and sorrowful, like a finished shawl in the morning light. Chapter 14. The return to St. Mary Mead. The train from London to St. Mary Mead chugged through the countryside, its rhythmic clatter a soothing backdrop to Miss Jane Marple's thoughts. She sat by the window, her knitting bag nestled beside her, the pale blue wool in her hands, now a nearly completed shawl, its pattern as intricate as the mystery she had just unravelled. The autumn landscape unfolded in hues of gold and russet, the fields and hedgerows of Surrey giving way to the familiar lanes of her village. To an onlooker, she might have appeared a frail, elderly spinster, her white hair tucked beneath a sensible hat, her eyes half closed as if dozing. But Miss Marple's mind was alert, sifting through the echoes of the Hargrove case, Lydia Black's desperate love, the decoy parcel, and the duplicate letter opener that had turned Sir Reginald's own trap into his doom. The platform at St. Mary Mead was quiet, save for the cheerful whistle of the station master and the chatter of a few villagers collecting parcels. Raymond West awaited her, his car parked under a chestnut tree, its leaves drifting like golden coins. He tipped his hat, a grin spreading across his face. "Aunt Jane," he said, taking her suitcase, "you've done it again." Craddock telephoned Lydia Black's confession has London buzzing. "How did you know it was her?" Miss Marple smiled, faintly, settling into the car as Raymond drove toward her cottage. "Human nature, my dear. It's the same in a mansion or a village." Lydia's love for Sir Reginald was a thread that ran too tight, like Mrs. Carter's daughter in the village, who stole for a man who didn't love her. When I saw her hands tremble, her eyes avoid mine, I knew she carried a secret heavier than loyalty. Raymond chuckled, steering past the village green, where children played and Mrs. Bantry's roses bloomed in defiance of the autumn chill. "You make it sound simple, but you turned a locked-room murder into a solved case. The parcel, the paint, the glove, how did you piece it together?" Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, the shawl nearly complete. It was the parcel. Raymond, Sir Reginald mailed it to himself, a decoy to test his suspected betrayers, Victor Lang, Harold Thornton. But Lydia saw her chance. She took the original opener, replaced it with a duplicate smeared with his blood from a shaving cut and theatrical paint from the attic. The silk glove fibre, borrowed from Lady Hargrove's careless habits, was her red herring, meant to point to others, like Mr. Simmons' marked coin, meant to catch a thief but used to trap him instead. Raymond shook his head, pulling up to her cottage, its thatched roof glowing in the late afternoon sun. "And the window latch. That was the key, wasn't it?" "Indeed," Miss Marple said, stepping out with her knitting bag. "A loose latch, known only to those who cleaned the study. Lydia used it to enter that night, bolting the door after to make it seem impossible. In St. Mary Mead, we had a similar case. Mrs. Price's shed, unlocked by a forgotten latch, let her maid steal jam unnoticed. Inside her cottage, the familiar comforts enveloped her, the scent of lavender, the ticking of her mantel clock, the neat rows of her rose garden visible through the window. She set her knitting bag on the table, the shawl now complete, its edges tidy as the solution to the Hargrove case. Raymond made tea, his curiosity unabated. What happens now, Aunt? Jane, the Hargroves, Victor, the company. Miss Marple settled into her armchair, her eyes drifting to the garden. The Hargroves will mend in time. Lady Evelyn will carry her guilt, but she's strong, like Mrs. Bantry after her own scandal. Amelia must decide if Victor's ambition outweighs her love. Young hearts are resilient, but cautious. Edgar will paint, perhaps find his way without his father's shadow. Hargrove Industries will survive, as businesses do, under Amelia's steady hand. Raymond sipped his tea, his eyes gleaming. And Lydia Black. Miss Marple's voice softened. She faced justice, poor soul. Love drove her to madness, as it did Mrs. Carter's daughter, who wept in court, but found peace in confession. Lydia's heart was her undoing, but truth has set it free, in a way. The village was quiet as evening fell, the church bells tolling softly across the green. Miss Marple felt a gentle satisfaction, like the last stitch in her shawl. The Hargrove case had been a tapestry of deceit, blood, paint, and a glove woven into a pattern of desperate love. In St. Mary Mead, she had unravelled lies with a glance. In London, it had taken a trap, but the truth had emerged, clear as the autumn sky. As Raymond left, promising to write the case into a novel, Miss Marple stood at her window, her eyes on the roses. Human nature, she murmured, is the greatest mystery of all. But there's always a thread to pull, if you know where to look.